Welcome back to Paranormal M. Thanks for joining me for tonight's video. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories. Tonight's first story comes from someone who experienced something strange after midnight and is trying to understand it in a serious way. They talk about a sudden rotten smell in the room, a dark smoky shape, and the feeling that something was nearby. They also used chanting to calm themselves and feel protected. So get comfortable, listen in, and I hope you all sleep well tonight. I'm sharing this because I'm genuinely trying to understand it, not because I'm claiming I know exactly what happened. I'd really like to hear from people who have studied Hindu occult traditions, Tantra, the Puranas, regional folklore, or related spiritual lineages. I'm not looking for jokes or quick dismissals. I'm trying to approach this carefully and respectfully, and I'd be grateful for thoughtful perspectives. Last night, sometime a little after midnight, I was fully awake in my room. Nothing unusual had been happening before that. I hadn't been sleep deprived, and the previous few nights had been normal. Then, all at once, there was this strong smell in the room. It was like something gamb, rotten, and decaying. It had not been there earlier. What unsettled me most was that the smell didn't stay constant. It would suddenly grow stronger, almost as though whatever carried it was moving closer. Soon after that, I had this very intense feeling that something was present with me in the room. What I perceived was not a solid figure. It looked more like a dark, smoky, semi-transparent form. At moments, I thought I could make out a very large mouth and sometimes reddish eyes inside the darkness. For a short while, its shape seemed to shift into something snake-like. Then it returned to that darker, smoky form. There was also one moment where it appeared as though the head had been cut off or separated from the body. Along with that, I briefly saw an image that reminded me of a strange painted portrait of a man with exaggerated lips. It wasn't realistic. It felt more like an abstract, disturbing face, and the feeling around it was deeply negative. As soon as this began, I started chanting the Hanuman Chalisa. I also remembered whatever I could of the Narayan Kavach without looking at my phone, and I kept repeating, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. My own experience while chanting was that the presence could not come close to me. It felt as if the chanting created a kind of boundary. After some time, the rotten smell disappeared completely, and eventually I felt calm enough to lie down and sleep. For context, our house is partly under renovation right now. Some rooms are unfinished, and a few areas are rarely used. There are also tamarind and kikar trees near the property, though I'm not assuming those are necessarily connected. I should also mention that I have previously been medically evaluated, and no neurological or psychiatric condition was found that would explain experiences like this. What I'm trying to understand is how different traditions discuss things like this: perceived presences, foul or unusual odors, smoky or shifting apparitions, snake-like forms, and the use of protective practices such as Hanuman Chalisa, Narayan Kavach, or the chanting of Ram Nam. If anyone is familiar with Hindu, Tantric, Puranic, regional, or other esoteric traditions, I'd sincerely appreciate any references that might help me study this properly. I'm especially interested in primary texts, traditional commentaries, or teachings from established lineages, rather than internet lists or casual videos. I'm not trying to sensationalize this. I'm simply trying to understand how serious traditions have spoken about experiences with these kinds of characteristics. Hey, I want to share a couple of stories with you. Some of my experiences working in a nursing home one summer, and a strange, tender memory from my childhood home. I hope you'll find them as intriguing and heartfelt as I remember living them. Let me start with my summer job at the nursing home. I'm going to change some names and details to keep people's privacy, but the essence of the stories is all true. Now, I want to be honest up front. Some of what I witnessed might be explained by mental illness or the effects of age, but other moments, well, they were just plain unexplainable. There was this one gentleman I took care of. Let's call him Mr. Landon. Every night he would tell me about his father, who had passed away more than 40 years ago. Mr. Landon said he saw his dad walking the halls of the unit, just pacing back and forth, as if he was searching for something or someone. What struck me was that Mr. Landon wasn't just imagining it. He was so vivid and detailed in his descriptions. It was as if the spirit was real and restless. But that wasn't all. Mr. Landon had this eerie knack. He could point to any other resident, and within the week, that person would pass away. I'm not one to believe in supernatural powers, but multiple times it felt like he somehow knew when someone's time was near. It was unsettling, to say the least. Then there was Mrs. Bennett, an elderly lady struggling with dementia. One night, I was taking her dinner order, asking her the usual questions: how she was feeling, what she had planned for the evening. She told me she was going to talk with her daughter later. I assumed she meant earlier because visiting hours were over, but then she said something that gave me chills. Yeah, she watches me through the window at night. I didn't know what to say. Was it just her mind playing tricks? Or was there something else going on? I'll never forget the unease in her voice, the way her eyes darted to the window as she spoke. Now, I want to tell you about two strange moments that happened back to back in the kitchen. I was the last one there, getting ready to clock out. The lights were off, and I was just about to leave when suddenly, bang! I turned around, startled, and saw a tomato slicer had fallen off the table. This wasn't just any slicer. It was heavy, with rubber pegs designed to keep it from sliding around. There was no draft, no one else in the room. It just fell. As I bent down to pick it up and set it back on the counter, something caught my eye out of the corner of my vision. A faint white shape, almost like a ghostly figure. I blinked and turned to look directly, but it was gone. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding, wondering if I was imagining things. Those are just a few of the strange, quiet moments I experienced working there. They stayed with me long after summer ended. Now, switching gears to my childhood home, I was about 7 or 8 years old then, and I shared a bed with my mom most nights. She was a single parent, and our house always felt different. I've always had a sensitivity to energies, seeing auras, sensing when people's feelings shift, even dreams that would come true. It's hard to explain, but I always felt like I was being watched, even when no one was around. Every night, without fail, I felt someone sitting on the edge of my bed. I could see the mattress dip slightly, and I'd feel a cold breeze on my face and arms, like a window was open. But my mom would check those windows over and over. There was never a draft or any explanation. My hair would lift gently, as if a quiet wind was brushing past. One particular night stands out. I was reading a book with my little nightlight glowing softly. As usual, the cold air began brushing my face and hands, and I felt that presence again, sitting right there. Terrified, I ran to my mom's room, and she comforted me as best she could. But then, something extraordinary happened. Tiny, shimmering specks, like glitter, started falling from the ceiling, slowly and gently. I held out my hand to catch it, but every speck vanished the moment it touched my skin. I looked at my mom, and she was smiling, tears in her eyes telling me, "I see it too." We laughed, feeling a sudden calm wash over us. We didn't question where the glitter came from or what it meant. It just felt like a beautiful sign, a moment of peace in the night. After that night, my mom began sharing her own experiences, feeling energies, seeing auras, and even visits from an angel named Michael. He told her things that later came true. including a prophecy about a building being constructed in our town and a terminal illness she would face. When the building's construction was announced years later, we both screamed in disbelief. That night with the glitter was one of our last deep conversations before she passed away from the cancer Michael had foretold. It was as if that gentle, sparkling moment was a comfort, a reminder that we weren't alone. I wanted to share these stories because sometimes it helps just to say them out loud, to know others have felt the unexplainable too. If you've ever experienced something like the glitter falling from the ceiling, or the quiet presence in a room, I'd love to hear about it. These moments, strange as they are, remind us of the mysteries that gently brush past our everyday lives. I grew up in a family where religion was kind of split down the middle. On my mom's side, everyone was very Catholic. Church, prayers, all of that was just part of life. But on my dad's side, the family was Kardecicist Spiritist. I don't know how common that is outside Brazil, but it's basically a belief in mediumship, spirits, communication with the dead, and a Christian-based philosophy connected to Allan Kardec. So I grew up around stories like that, and honestly, I was fascinated by them. I was the kid asking my grandmother to tell me everything she had seen or felt. I wanted every detail. I also knew, even when I was little, that something ran in my family. My brother and I both seemed to have that sensitivity. I used to see things sometimes, and instead of being less curious as I got older, I became more curious. I watched ghost videos, paranormal shows, people trying to catch things on camera, the whole thing. My dad's side of the family had been connected to that belief for generations. They were mediums, and some of them spent years helping people through it. So this wasn't treated like some strange little hobby in our house. It was part of the family history. Now, this next part might sound unrelated, but I promise it matters. Around 2016, when I was about 11, Brazil was going through a really bad financial crisis. My mom was the main provider in our home, and she lost her job. After a while, she found another one, but it was far away, in another part of the country. We lived in the southeast, and the job was up north, so it wasn't exactly a quick commute. The job was too good to turn down, so she moved there, and my dad stayed behind with me and my brother. That period was really hard on all of us. My brother was older, I was still a kid, and being away from our mom affected us more than I think anyone expected. My dad suddenly had to handle everything at home. I was also dealing with depression at the time, and I was diagnosed when I was 11, so that gives you an idea of how heavy everything already felt. Years later, we found out my mom had bipolar disorder, but at the time, we didn't know that. During that same period, she decided to remodel our whole apartment, almost like she was trying to throw her frustration into fixing the place. So every day there were workers coming in and out, tools everywhere, dust everywhere, noise everywhere. And if you believe in energy, you can probably imagine what that felt like. The apartment itself was huge, and I did love it, but it had a strange feeling to it. We lived high up on the 17th floor, so I was used to doors slamming from the wind and random building noises at night. But there were other things too. Little things I can't really explain. And from my bedroom window, I could see 2 churches and a convent nearby. At night, they looked beautiful in a cold way, but also kind of unsettling. So, with all of that in mind, the actual story happened on April 18th, 2017. It was my grandmother's birthday, my dad's mom. The plan that day was simple. I would go to school, come home, study, finish a group project that was due before midnight, and then we'd go to my grandmother's house for her birthday. Most of the day went fine, but when I finally sat down to finish the project, I found out the friend who was supposed to start it hadn't done anything. Nothing. And she wasn't answering my messages. I was already tired. The apartment was full of workers. I hated being at school, I hated being at home, and now I had to do the whole project alone before leaving for my grandma's, who lived about 40 minutes away. So I just started working. I remember that day being very gray and foggy, so it felt like night came earlier than usual. Around 6 in the evening, which was when we were supposed to leave, I was still finishing the project. And then, right when I finally got it done, the file corrupted and disappeared. I cried immediately. At that age, I didn't really understand how to recover files or troubleshoot anything, so in my mind, the whole project was gone forever. Since it was due that night, my dad told me to stay home and redo it, and he went to my grandmother's birthday without me. Redoing it wasn't impossible because I already knew the material. The problem was that I was exhausted and frustrated. And I don't know if this was because I was tired, but my room felt strangely dark, even with the lights on. The hallway light was on too. So was the bathroom light. But somehow everything still looked dim. Eventually, I finished the project, submitted it, and decided I was done for the night. It was around 10. My dad still wasn't home, and I was scared to be alone in my room, so I left my bedroom door wide open. I kept the lights on in my room, the bathroom, and the hallway. Then I lay down and tried to sleep, but just as I was starting to drift off, I suddenly felt wide awake. My first instinct was to look toward the door. Because of how my bed was positioned, my feet were closest to the door. I couldn't see down the hallway, only the entrance to my room. And the second I looked there, I felt this horrible discomfort. Not panic yet, just the feeling that something was wrong. Then, I saw it. A shadow figure slowly came into view at my doorway. It looked human-shaped, but it had no face, no details, nothing. Just this black shape with a darker kind of haze around it. The only clear feature it had was its eyes. They were big, white, and glowing. It grabbed the door frame near the foot of my bed and leaned in, almost like it was checking the room. At first, it didn't look at me. That was the part that made it feel even stranger. It wasn't rushing at me or trying to scare me. It was just looking around, like it had walked into the wrong place. I was completely frozen. I started blinking because I thought maybe it would disappear. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But it stayed there. Then I wondered if it was sleep paralysis. I didn't know much about sleep paralysis back then, except that people said they couldn't move. So I tried moving my fingers and my feet, and I could move. That movement caught its attention. It turned its head toward me and looked right at me. We locked eyes for a few seconds, and then it slowly pulled back out of the room the same way it had come in. The whole thing probably lasted less than a minute, but it felt much longer. As soon as it left, the room looked brighter again, but I was still terrified. I stayed completely still for a few minutes, already crying, because I was afraid that if I made noise, it would come back. Then I finally screamed for my brother. I should mention, yes, he had been home the whole time. I screamed his name over and over until he came running into my room. I told him I needed to go to his room, and then I told him everything. My brother and I weren't very close at that time, but that night, he was really kind to me. He hugged me, calmed me down, and let me sleep in his bed, which almost never happened. After I told him what I saw, he admitted that he had been feeling weird too. He said that for the last few minutes, the apartment had felt heavy, like something was off. That was the first thing that made me feel like maybe I hadn't imagined it. We called my dad, and he was already driving home. When he got back, I refused to go anywhere near my room, so I slept in his bed. I was still very much the kind of kid who needed her dad when she was scared. My dad believed me. He always believed me when I told him about things like that. But this time, he looked disturbed in a way I didn't understand yet. The next morning, I made him go into my room to get my clothes and school stuff because I was not stepping in there. Then we sat down for breakfast, and he asked me to tell him exactly what happened. So I did. Then he asked, "What time was it?" I said, 10, and he got quiet. I asked him why. That's when he told me what happened at my grandmother's house. He said everything had been normal at the party until around 10 at night. Then my grandmother, who was basically the strongest medium in our family, suddenly said she was worried about me and told my dad he needed to go home. He said that as soon as she said it, he felt the same heaviness my brother had described. So he left. But when he got to his car and started driving away, he suddenly stopped. He saw the exact same thing I had seen. A black, human-shaped figure with bright white eyes moved around his car and looked directly at him. Then, it disappeared. Right after that, my brother and I called him. The drive from my grandmother's usually took around 40 minutes. That night, he made it home in about 25. After that, I didn't sleep in my room for a few days. I was too afraid to be alone. On nights when my dad worked late and came home after 11, I would stay awake and wait for him. Eventually, things got calmer. Life went back to normal, or at least as normal as it could. But that night has stayed with me more clearly than almost any other experience I've had. It's still the most vivid and confirmed encounter I can remember. The strange thing is, when I think about it now, it doesn't feel only scary. It feels sad too. Even talking about it makes me feel like I could cry. I don't really think that thing wanted to hurt me. I think maybe it wandered into our apartment, noticed I could see it, and got startled too. Then, somehow, it went to my dad. It didn't feel like a good presence, exactly. But it didn't feel purely evil either. It felt lost, and heavy, and very, very real. Hey there. I want to share with you some pretty extraordinary experiences I've had. Some might call them paranormal. Others might say they're miracles, or just strange coincidences. Either way, they've deeply touched my life, so I hope you'll find them as fascinating as I do. The first story isn't exactly paranormal, but more like a miracle, and it all begins even before I was born. You see, my mom was pregnant with me and my sister. We were identical twins. Around a few months into the pregnancy, things took a scary turn. My mom started showing signs of going into labor way too early. She rushed to the hospital, and it turned out my sister's umbilical cord was wrapped tightly around my right hand, cutting off my circulation. It's something I've lived with ever since. My right hand is different from my left, my finger's a bit larger, and I don't have nails on those fingers. I've always thought of myself as a bit like Nemo. You know, the little fish with a fin that's a bit different. Here's the wild thing. My sister, in a way, saved my life by causing my mom to go into labor early. My mom had no idea I was losing blood flow to my hand. If my sister hadn't put my mom into labor, I might not have survived. Sadly, my sister didn't make it. She passed away inside my mom's womb. So, I like to think of her as my guardian angel, watching over me. Someday, I want to get a butterfly tattoo in her honor, a symbol of transformation and hope. My second experience is also tied to my sister. For a while, we lived with my mom's ex, not the best situation. One evening, they got into a heated argument, and in the chaos, my mom's Christmas tree got knocked over. Every single ornament shattered into tiny pieces, except one. My sister's ornament survived completely untouched. It's this old, fragile angel head with her birthday engraved on it. It's strange because everything else broke, and this one just stayed perfect. Every Christmas, that ornament stays on our tree, a little reminder of her presence, and maybe a little magic. The third experience is a bit more eerie and personal. After my grandpa passed away on December 26, 2020, he had contracted COVID and was hospitalized. Things got strange. I wasn't close with my family and wasn't invited to his funeral, and I was actually the last to find out about his death. Then, about a week later, I was fast asleep when I suddenly heard a loud, clear voice right in my ear say, "Hello, Lex." It was unmistakably his voice. I woke up instantly, half expecting my mom to be playing a prank on me, but she was peacefully sleeping on the couch. I've never experienced anything like that before or since. I like to believe it was his way of saying hello one last time, since I never got to say goodbye. Now, shifting gears to something a bit different, the strange howling I started hearing around my home. I've lived in my house for about 10 years and never experienced anything weird until a few months ago. Here's the setup. I know all the dogs around, at least within 2 blocks. Most are small breeds, not known for howling. There's a collie 2 houses down that I've never heard bark in all these years, and 2 big Mastiff-type mixes right behind my house. I can see those 2 dogs from my kitchen, dining room, and even my son's room when they're in their backyard. I can also see into the den they hang out in through my neighbor's glass doors. So one morning, I started hearing this muffled howling, like it was muffled through a pillow or something soft. At first, I ignored it. Dogs howl sometimes, right? But this wasn't prolonged, and it only happened when I was the only one home. Over time, it started to creep me out. The sound felt like it was coming from outside, near the big dogs, but whenever I went outside to check, the howling stopped. It was as if the noise was an inside sound made to seem outside. I checked on the dogs. They were always calm, lounging in their yard, no signs of distress. I even looked through my security cameras to catch them howling, but nothing. It was baffling. I tried not to let it bother me, especially since it only happened when I was alone in the morning. But then, one Monday when my son had the day off, he heard it too. We both heard the muffled howling at the same time, but when I peeked outside, I couldn't hear a thing. It was like the sound was inside the house, but we couldn't locate it. Moving on to a place I worked, the Disneyland Hotel. I worked there for over a year, delivering things to guest rooms late at night. One night, around 11:30 p.m., I was making a delivery near the pool deck, which is surrounded by a gate. Suddenly, I heard children laughing and splashing, very lively sounds. Because I was on a schedule, I didn't stop to check, assuming the kids were being watched by an adult. After delivering the items, I was heading back when I heard the laughter and splashing again. The pool itself was well lit, but the deck was dim. I expected to see some kids playing and an adult nearby, but as I got to the gate, the sound stopped abruptly. Looking around, there was no one at the pool or on the deck. It was eerily quiet. This was puzzling because while the hotel has a history of adult deaths, there's no record of children passing there. And I've been deaf in my left ear since childhood, so for me to hear anything, it had to be loud. It still makes me wonder what I actually heard that night. Now let me tell you about a place in Aurora, Colorado, the Third Bridge. It's known for being haunted, but not as famous as others. A friend invited me there as a teenager because I have some clairvoyant abilities. The place is known for a tragic Native American massacre and a fatal car accident involving teenagers. During my visits, and I've been there between 8 and a dozen times, I've experienced some pretty intense things. I've heard the sound of drums all around me, been chased by a car from the 60s or 70s with a single headlight that would appear and disappear mysteriously, and even had my leg forcibly pushed onto a barbed wire fence, leaving a puncture wound that bled lightly for a week and left a scar. One summer night, on my way there, my windshield fogged up badly, hard to clear even with the defrost on high, despite the night being warm and clear. I always carried a drink with me in case I needed to throw up. The activity seemed limited to the road and a small circular group of trees. The negative energy was so strong that once I left and got back to the lit city streets, it would fade away. After these trips, I often brought home more than memories. Spirits would follow me, sometimes dozens of children and teenagers pushing on my back for an hour, making it impossible to sleep. I'd hear loud bangs in rooms I wasn't in, but nothing ever fell or caused the noise. One time, after doing laundry late at night, I found the washer lid open in the normal loading position, but I was the only one home besides my 2 dogs. I also heard my name called when I was alone. Eventually, I moved to California and left the 3rd bridge behind, hoping for some peace. But just last night, something strange happened again. Around 3:30 a.m., as I was trying to fall asleep, a female voice whispered my name softly into my deaf ear. I sat up immediately, looked around, and saw nothing. Then, a bright light swept across my room, like a powerful flashlight or car headlight, but no one was outside. I grabbed my bear spray just to feel safe before finally settling back down. It's odd because the place used to call me back regularly, but now that I'm away, I thought it would stop. Hearing that voice makes me wonder if it's trying to call me back, or if a new presence has arrived. Speaking of spirits, I want to tell you about the 2 that have been with me for years. Paul, a 9-year-old boy from the early 1800s, and Christopher, a man from the 1920s. They've always been around individually, but never together. Friends who are sensitive have told me that when one is present, the other leaves. When I moved from Colorado to California, they came with me, but still, they never appeared in the same room at the same time. I also had a 3rd spirit, Lily, who was connected to a close friend of mine. After a falling out with that friend, Lily vanished, which made sense. But recently, things have changed. After denying Lily's boyfriend access to a special book of shadows I had shared with my friend, I deleted the document entirely to avoid conflict. Soon after, Paul and Christopher started breaking their old pattern. I began seeing them in the same room, sometimes moving so fast it seemed like they were running. It's unusual since they've never shared space before, especially without me there. Even more surprising, Lily has returned. She disappears quickly when I notice her, but sometimes I catch her rummaging through my things, like she's searching for something important. It's funny at first, but increasingly frustrating, especially since I live with my grandmother, and I often find important papers missing or rearranged. So, that's the collection of my unexplainable, sometimes chilling, sometimes comforting experiences. Each one has left a mark on me, shaping how I see the world and what lies beyond the surface. Thanks for listening. I hope you found a bit of wonder in these stories too. You know, I'd heard people say the Star of India in San Diego was haunted, but I never really put much stock in it. I'd seen one of those ghost hunter shows about it years ago, and honestly, it felt a little overdone to me. So when I went there recently with my family, I wasn't thinking about ghosts at all. I was focused on having a sweet day out with my little boy. We walked through most of the ship together, and nothing strange happened. It was actually really lovely. And if you like old ships even a little bit, it's absolutely worth visiting. At one point, my husband and son went up toward the higher decks, and I wandered down into the hull by myself. Near the front of the ship, there was this section blocked off for employees. It had muslin cloth draped around it, and a small gate keeping visitors out. That's when I heard a woman talking. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I figured there must be a staff member back there, maybe explaining something or chatting with someone. But as I moved closer to look at some of the ropes and displays nearby, the voice started getting quieter. Not clearer, like you'd expect if you were walking towards someone. Quieter, more muffled. Then it just stopped. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe whoever was back there had noticed me and wanted privacy. But curiosity got the better of me, and I became a full-on nosy Nell. I tried to peek through a little gap in the cloth to see if anyone was moving around back there. Nothing. No footsteps. No shifting shadows. No sign of anyone. And then I realized something else. I hadn't seen any female employees on the ship that day. Not one. And the voice had only sounded like one person speaking. It could have been someone telling a long story, sure, but there were no pauses, no replies, no other voice joining in. I walked away, telling myself it was probably nothing. But as soon as I got farther from that blocked-off section, the voice came back, louder this time. That was the part that really unsettled me. Not because it was dramatic or terrifying, but because it felt wrong in such a quiet, specific way. My brain kept trying to solve it. Maybe someone on the dock was talking, and the sound was somehow carrying into the ship. Maybe there was a speaker somewhere. Maybe the acoustics were just strange. So I went closer again, mostly to prove to myself that I was being ridiculous. And again, the voice faded. It got softer and more muffled until there was only silence. The strange thing is, it never sounded clear. It was always covered and distant, like someone speaking through fabric or from behind a wall. But the closer I got, the harder it became to hear, which made no sense at all. Maybe it really was someone on the docks. Maybe it was an employee I just never saw, and she stopped talking because some random woman was peering into the restricted area, like a raccoon in a museum. Maybe the sound was bouncing over from the gift shop on the boat next door. I don't know. I'm still not saying the ship is haunted, but I will say this. Something about that voice didn't behave the way a normal voice should. And that's the little part of the day that stayed with me. Hey there. I wanted to share some experiences I've had with spirits over the years and get your thoughts on whether I should be concerned about some recent changes I've noticed. So, I've been familiar with two spirits named Paul and Christopher for quite some time now. Paul's a playful little guy. He was about 9 when he passed, so he sometimes pulls the occasional harmless prank on me, which honestly feels kind of endearing. Christopher, on the other hand, has always been peaceful, never causing any trouble. But recently, there's been this other presence, Lily. I'm not as familiar with her, and I think she might be behind some changes in the spirits around me. I'm seriously debating whether to try to get rid of her, but I don't want to overreact if there's nothing harmful going on. Let me take you back to one of my earlier experiences that really stuck with me. It was during a haunted tour on the RMS Queen Mary. Now, a little background. I never learned to swim as a kid. I was stubborn and, honestly, pools just seemed gross to me, so I never bothered to learn. Also, at home, I've been regularly visited by a spirit of a young boy, around 9 years old. I know it's not connected to this story because of the size difference in their hands, but I mention it because it's part of my everyday life. So, I paid the $30 fee for the haunted tour of the Queen Mary, not expecting much at all. I thought these tours mostly just hype up the history and the tragic accidents that happened on these old ships. The tour itself was mostly uneventful, really. We had this quirky guide who was full of stories about the ship's past and the many hauntings reported over the years. He told us about various deaths and the ghostly sightings that visitors and staff had experienced. It was all fascinating, but nothing out of the ordinary. There were 3 kids on the tour, too, probably between 5 and 8 years old. They were incredibly well behaved. I honestly forgot they were even there at times because they were so quiet and attentive. As the tour drew to a close, we reached the pool deck. Now this was the highlight because the guide had the most stories about this area. The pool itself had been drained years ago for legal reasons, but people often reported seeing wet footprints on the deck, even though no one was actually there. He told us about a little girl named Jaki, who was said to haunt the pool deck. Interestingly, there were no records of a young girl named Jaki ever boarding the ship or dying there, which seemed odd. But when you think about it, a luxury liner like the Queen Mary, on par with the Titanic, it's possible a child could have been smuggled aboard or simply forgotten in the records. While the guide was talking about Jaki, I had my back to a display showing old photos of the ship. No one could have sneaked up on me from behind, and the kids were on the other side of the group with their families, well within my sight. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a small child's hand gently grab the pointer finger, middle finger, and thumb of my left hand. My right hand was busy recording the tour on my phone. I can actually share the videos if anyone's curious. The hand started pulling me gently backward, toward a bar area behind me. The direction was through the display, which obviously couldn't be walked through physically. The hand felt small, like that of a 5-year-old. At the end of the tour, I asked the guide how old Jaki was supposed to be, since he hadn't mentioned it. He said she was believed to be between 5 and 10 years old. Judging by the tiny hand that grabbed me, I'm guessing closer to 5. It's heartbreaking to think a little girl so young might have passed away there. I felt a deep sadness for her, like she didn't get nearly the life she deserved, and it made me feel worse knowing she was haunting that space. Now, moving on to something a bit more personal, I've been sleepwalking since I was a little girl. I'm 27 now, and it hasn't stopped. When I was younger, I'd often wander into my parents' room and fall asleep at the foot of their bed, especially after nightmares. I even fell down the stairs a few times without realizing I'd gotten out of bed in the first place. As an adult, I still sleepwalk to the kitchen for water or to the bathroom. My grandma and sisters have noticed it too. I think I might have inherited this from my dad, who still sleepwalks at 60 and did so as a kid as well. When I was younger, I didn't think much of it, just a kid being a kid. But as an adult, something changed. Most nights I'm okay, but sometimes when I'm sleepwalking near the stairs, my room is down a hallway and around the corner, I feel a hand on my shoulder. It wakes me up and stops me from going further, just in time to prevent me from falling. When I look around, no one is there. My sisters are in their rooms. My mom's still asleep in the master bedroom near the stairs, and my dad usually works nights. At first, I thought maybe it was part of a dream, my mind creating the feeling to explain why I was awake near the stairs. But I'm fully awake when I realize someone or something is there, and the hand is real. It's a solid, gentle touch that holds me back. I can't figure out what or who it could be, especially since no one is physically present. Do you think it's possible that a spirit might be watching over me during those moments? Maybe they knew I was about to fall and stepped in to keep me safe. It's a comforting thought, even though it's a bit eerie. Speaking of eerie, I worked at a grocery store chain for about 5 years, often taking the swing shift from 3:30 p.m. to midnight. The store was about 10 miles from Denver International Airport, which some say was built on Native American burial grounds. I've lived nearby since I was a kid and have experienced hauntings in 2 homes I've lived in. One was brand new when we moved in, so it wasn't just old age. One night, I had to stay until around 3 a.m. because our overnight cashier was running late due to illness. At about 12:15 a.m., all the receipt printers suddenly made a loud noise. Nothing unusual since the store's computer marks that as the end of the business day, even though it's open 24 hours. The store had an armed security guard who was a military vet. He was one of those gentlemen who'd always walk women to their cars at the end of their shifts, which I appreciated. I usually stood near the security door when I left so he could escort me. The neighborhood was rough, so security was tight, and the guards were visibly armed. Around 2 a.m., the store would usually be dead except for a handful of night crew stocking shelves and maybe 1 or 2 late shoppers. One night, as I was zoning out between staring at a candy rack and glancing at a night crew member I thought was cute, though I didn't dare ask him out, since he was openly gay, I noticed a cardboard gum display moving slightly. It was a clear, still night outside, with no wind, no earthquakes, nothing that could have caused it. I focused on the display for a long time, trying to see if anyone nearby was messing with it, but no one was near enough to touch it. I have ADHD, so I tend to move or fidget a lot to keep myself entertained. But that night, I was so focused on the display moving that I didn't do my usual restless shifting, which was unusual. The security guard, who was monitoring the cameras, noticed and asked if everything was okay. I said yes, but didn't mention the moving display, because I knew he was afraid of anything paranormal, something we'd talked about before. Do you think the proximity to the burial grounds could have caused a spirit to want to be noticed? It's been on my mind ever since. Lastly, I want to tell you about my current living situation. I rent an older house, probably built before central heating and air conditioning were common. It has no vents, and the windows are single pane, so sounds easily travel through. I live here with my grandma, who's 82 and in pretty good health, though she uses a walker that's quite loud on the floors. For the past week or so, I've been waking up around 9 a.m. to study the menu for a new restaurant job I just started. And during these mornings, I keep hearing this strange breathing sound coming from the hallway. At first, I thought maybe it was outside, so I checked through the window behind the couch where I sit, but there was nothing there. Sometimes I even get up to see if my grandma is walking around without her walker, but she's always still asleep, often with her dog curled up beside her. The breathing sound has been consistent for about a week now. The house hasn't been renovated since before I moved in, just before Halloween 2015, except for a bathroom addition. Nothing else has changed, which makes this sound weirder. Despite my sleep schedule changing from noon to 9 a.m., I'm not overly tired, so I don't think it's my imagination. I'm really struggling to find a non-paranormal explanation for this breathing sound, yet part of me hopes there's a simple reason. If you have any ideas or thoughts, I truly appreciate hearing them. So, with all this, I'm left wondering about Lily and the changes she might be bringing to the spirits around me. Should I be worried? Or is she just another friendly presence, like Paul and Christopher, who means no harm? I'd love to hear from anyone with experience dealing with spirits or the paranormal. Thanks for listening. Hey, I want to share some stories with you. Stories that have stuck with me and my friends over the years. The kind that make you pause and wonder about the things we can't always explain. So, settle in, and I'll tell you about 3 experiences that have haunted the edges of everyday life for some people I know. First, there's a close friend of mine. Let's call her Lila. A few months back, Lila started having some pretty serious health problems. It began with her blood sugar soaring way too high and her kidneys not working like they should. Now Lila, she's been drinking a crazy amount of soda every day, like between a dozen and 20 cans. Friends and doctors alike told her she really needed to cut back, and as far as I know, she's been trying to do just that. She sees her primary care doctor about once a month because of some bad discs in her back that are slowly getting worse. They're watching closely to see when surgery might be needed to fuse more of those discs, and they keep an eye on how the strong painkillers she takes are affecting her overall health. But then, about a week ago, something terrifying happened. Lila was just wandering around the house she shares with her parents and her kid. I think her child was with the ex-husband that weekend, since he has custody on weekends. Suddenly, Lila became violently agitated and completely incoherent. Her parents were so scared they called 911 immediately. She was rushed to the nearest emergency room, a town or 2 away, and there doctors discovered she needed heart medication for the rest of her life and a heart monitor. What's wild is that just days before, she had seen her doctor, and no one had any clue there was anything wrong with her heart. Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Lila has always believed her house is haunted. I've been hearing her stories for about 8 years now. Most of them involve toys moving on their own, without batteries, wiring, or any way to move by themselves, just sliding or rolling across the room. Her daughter has one of those toy lawnmowers with plastic balls that rattle when pushed, and this toy has made noise all by itself when her daughter is clearly at her dad's for the weekend. They live in Minnesota, which, as far as I know, doesn't get earthquakes. And these weird things never happen during tornado season either. When Lila was a teenager, she told me she saw a black shadow lurking behind her in the mirror as she brushed her teeth. She'd turn around and it would be gone, and she never saw it again that day. It's been more than 10 years since then, but she still wonders if those shadows could somehow be connected to her sudden heart problems. I don't know if there's any way they could, but it's haunting to think about. Now, on to a story from Colorado about a place called the Third Bridge. It's steeped in history and sorrow. Long ago, local Native American tribes were massacred in a war near a settlement there. Even now, people say you can hear the distant war drums echoing through the night, as if the spirits of that time are still marching. There's also a tragic tale of a car crash. A group of teenagers were speeding through the area, as teenagers do, and the crash left just one survivor, who was disabled. I first went out there in 2006 with a friend who knew the way. We waited until it was dark and then drove out. I've always been a bit sensitive to these things, and this place hit me like a punch to the gut. Getting out of the car was hard, and stepping off the road even harder. We explored a bit, and I took some pictures. They showed floating specks of dirt in the air, but nothing else. It was the only time I ever heard those war drums. They were always far away, shifting in direction, impossible to pinpoint. On our way back, something ran into the road, a dog, probably a border collie. I got out to check, but there was no dog there. My friend later told me the property owner said they'd lost a collie in that area years ago. I went back every year or two after that. The gut punch feeling never left. I never heard the drums or saw the dog again, but I had other experiences. One night, it was nearly 90 degrees, just a turn away from the spot, and my windshield fogged up so badly I couldn't see. Every time I tried to leave, a car with a single headlight chased me out. I always felt watched and followed. It never felt like a place that welcomed me. I stopped going when I moved out of state, but sometimes I still feel drawn back, though I'm usually glad I'm so far away. Lastly, I want to tell you about my own experience with what I think might have been a child ghost. Now, full disclosure, my family has a history of mental health issues. Bipolar disorder runs deep on my mom's side, so much so that being the middle child can almost guarantee it. There's also schizophrenia in my family. An uncle battled it until he passed in 2011. I've never seen a mental health professional myself, so I can't say if what I experienced was a hallucination or something else. But here's what happened. I lived in a big, 2-story house in Denver, with lots of huge windows and 3 sliding doors. My parents used to complain about how expensive the curtains were because with nearly 30 windows, the sunlight just poured in. Even the smallest windows, like the ones in the bathrooms, were big enough for a grown adult to climb out of if they wanted. The youngest person living there was 17, though my parents had a friend with a toddler, about 3 years old. One summer morning, around 11 a.m., I was brushing my teeth in the downstairs bathroom. The sun was so bright that it almost blinded me, even reflecting off the nearby golf course. When I spat into the sink, I glanced over my right shoulder into the mirror. I just had this strange feeling like someone was watching me. And then, I saw him. A young boy, maybe 9 years old, standing there behind me. He was wearing clothes that looked like they were from the early 1900s, like a little boy from a century ago. I spun around instantly, heart pounding, thinking maybe someone had broken in, or that this kid might be a neighbor's child seeking help. But the house was empty. I searched every room, every corner, and there was no one there. No child, no intruder, just silence. I've never been able to explain what I saw. It's as if that boy was a whisper from the past, lingering in the sunlight and shadows of that old house. So, those are the stories. Lila's health and haunting shadows, the haunted bridge with its drums and phantom dog, and my own glimpse of a boy from another time. They remind me that sometimes the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that some mysteries are woven into the very places and people around us. Thanks for listening. About 3 decades ago, I found myself wrapped up in the world of movie theaters in Worcester, Massachusetts. I spent several years there, but there was this one theater that truly captured my heart, the grand old Poly Palace. Built back in 1926, it was a marvel of its time, a huge, beautiful building that eventually got carved up into 4 smaller cinemas. Even though it had been somewhat damaged during the modernization efforts in the late 1950s, many of its original features stubbornly clung on, whispering stories of bygone days. As the manager, I was given this hefty keychain that unlocked every nook and cranny of the building. I spent countless hours wandering its halls, exploring attics, basements, crawl spaces, everywhere but the curtain loft. That space was tucked about 80 feet up, accessible only by a daunting iron ladder. No way was I climbing that. The atmosphere inside was something else. On the second floor at the front of the building, there were these abandoned businesses, walled off and frozen in time. A music store, a ballet studio, maybe an office, all looking like relics from the 1940s or 50s. The wallpaper, faded now, was adorned with delicate ballerina motifs. An appealing mirror hung crookedly on the wall. It felt like stepping into a dream from the past. Then there was the old manager's office. It had these soaring ceilings with elegant crown molding and a stunning stained glass window that I believe dated back to 1912, probably salvaged from a neighboring theater. The office still housed that old, heavy safe. I once came across a newspaper article from the early 1940s in the public library describing an armed robbery. 2 men had tied up the managers right in that very office and looted the safe. One of those men was later executed in the electric chair, but for an unrelated crime. That made the place feel even more charged with history. We ended up using the office to store massive 30-gallon bags of popcorn during my time there. One of the more curious spots was a crawl space beneath the box office. You had to lift a hinged plywood panel and climb over a 4-foot wall to get in. On the other side, there were remnants of basement rooms, broken concrete and scattered bricks telling tales of decay. In one of those rooms, I discovered an old flared Coca-Cola glass, perfectly intact. I treasured it for years. I also found a deck of cards, snug inside a handmade leather pouch, the snap closure fashioned from a buffalo nickel. Little artifacts like these connected me to the past in a way nothing else could. The building even had old dressing rooms with makeup mirrors framed by light bulbs. The paint peeled off in flakes the size of potato chips. The whole place felt alive with history and, yes, whispers of the supernatural. Folks often said the Poly Palace was haunted. The head manager shared some spine-tingling experiences. For example, when they remodeled in the late 50s, the men's room in the basement was transformed into the manager's office. One night, while closing up, my boss was climbing the stairs to the main lobby when something caught his eye near the ornate 30-foot ceiling. He saw an apparition floating there, just drifting, before vanishing into the ceiling. Terrified, he bolted back down and hid in the office until dawn. On another occasion, late at night, the manager heard all the arcade machines in the lobby buzzing with electronic bleeps and bloops. Normally, they were powered off by the last show's end, but tonight they were alive. Annoyed at the usher for forgetting, he went to turn them off. The moment he opened the door, the noises stopped cold. Across the lobby, the machines were dark, truly powered off. The sound had come from nowhere. A projectionist once told me he glimpsed a face looking in at him through the booth window while shutting down the big theater upstairs. I have to admit, I took these stories with a grain of salt, especially given the sources. But my own experience? That's something I'll never forget. I was utterly obsessed with the Poli Palace's history and spent hours digging through newspaper archives, trying to piece together its story. There were rumors about a stagehand who died there during its vaudeville days, though I never found any proof. One day, I mentioned the theater to my mom, and she, in turn, talked about it with a woman she worked with. This woman claimed to be psychic, or maybe just sensitive to vibes, and said she'd been to the theater. She felt someone had indeed died there, and that his name started with the letter M. I remember thinking, all right, sure, sounds a little out there. Then, one slow midweek night, I was the only manager on duty. The 7 o'clock shows were playing, and I was buried in paperwork in the basement office. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. It was the box office cashier telling me I had a phone call. I asked who it was, but she didn't know. I picked up the phone and pressed the button for the main incoming line. Instantly, the earpiece erupted with this loud, piercing squealing and static. It was so close and intense that I thought something was wrong with our phone system rather than the caller's line. I said, "Hello?" Nothing but that awful noise. "Hello?" I tried again. Then a calm, flat male voice came through. "Hello." That was it. Silence, then the noise. I waited, expecting the caller to say more. "Who is this?" I asked, a bit puzzled. "This is Mike," the voice replied softly, not struggling against the static, just clear and calm. Then nothing more. I waited, but no further words came. "Mike who?" I pressed, feeling a little impatient. We had 2 mics working there at the time, but this voice didn't match either. Suddenly, the line went dead. No more noise, no one on the other end. I called Sandy, the box office cashier, to ask if the caller had asked for me by name. She said yes. That's when it hit me. The psychic woman's words about a man whose name started with M. Mike. The call never came again, and the strange noises never returned. No one ever admitted to a prank, and I never figured out who it was. Switching gears now, let me tell you about a different kind of haunting, one from Savannah, Georgia. More than 20 years ago, my then wife and I took a trip there. We stayed at this charming bed and breakfast made up of 2 large townhouses separated by a lush, verdant garden. The innkeeper spun tales of strange happenings that had occurred within the walls. Of course, nearly every bed and breakfast claims to be haunted. Ghost stories just add to the allure for folks like me. The inn was a 19th century beauty, nestled in Savannah's historic district near Forsyth Park. Savannah itself is steeped in ghost lore, with tours and stories woven into its moss-draped trees and cobblestone streets. Spending time there, it's easy to feel the presence of the past. The inn was a favorite of mine. I think it might have been our second stay there. The staff were warm and professional, always ready with a smile. I'm not much for chatting with other guests, but I enjoyed the conversations with the staff. Our room had a small balcony overlooking the street. One evening, after dinner, we stepped out there. Within seconds, a large flying beetle crashed right into my forehead. That was my cue to retreat indoors. That night was uneventful, no ghostly encounters. But the next morning, that's when things got weird. The bathroom had a classic clawfoot tub surrounded by a shower curtain. As I stepped out of the tub after showering, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And let me tell you, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The mirror was fogged with a light coating of condensation, but my face was still visible. Except, my eyes looked almost completely black. It was startling, my own reflection, but with eyes that seemed to belong to something otherworldly, almost demonic. I took a breath, trying to steady myself, then looked closer. The pupils in the reflection were hugely magnified, filling the entire eye and creating a terrifying effect. I had no explanation for it. I'd never seen anything like it before, and it never happened again. Curious, I called my wife in to see, and sure enough, her eyes showed the same strange magnification. Maybe it wasn't a ghost story in the traditional sense, but it was definitely strange and unexplainable. I wish I had taken a photo to capture that moment, but I didn't. I wonder if anyone else has ever seen something like that. Those eyes, so dark and vast, staring back from a mirror fogged by steam. Both the Pulley Palace and that Savannah bed and breakfast hold their secrets, their whispers, and their shadows. Sometimes the past reaches out in ways we can't fully understand, leaving us with stories that linger long after the lights have dimmed. So, when I was about 9 years old, my aunt sent me a doll for my birthday. She did that every year. It was kind of her thing. She would find these delicate porcelain dolls, usually dressed in outfits from different places or time periods, and mail one to me as a gift. I already had a little row of them on my dresser, right across from my bed, but this one was different. The moment I opened the box, I felt my stomach twist a little. The doll looked almost exactly like me. Same hair color, same little tilt to the mouth, even a tiny beauty mark on the same side of her face as mine. The only thing that was wrong were the eyes. Mine were brown. Hers were this flat, cloudy gray. I remember trying to tell myself it was just a weird coincidence, but I didn't like holding her. I didn't even like looking at her for too long. Still, I put her with the others on my dresser, because that's what I always did. After that, I started having trouble sleeping. At first, it was little things. Waking up in the middle of the night for no reason. Feeling like someone was standing near my bed. Having dreams I couldn't fully remember, but waking up scared anyway. Then there was the car incident. I had taken the doll with me while I was out with my grandpa. I know, 9 was probably a little old to still be dragging dolls around, but I did. I fell asleep in the back seat, and at some point, I thought I woke up. Except my grandpa wasn't in the driver's seat anymore. The car was quiet. Too quiet. I looked toward the front passenger seat, and there was this black shape sitting there. Not a person exactly, but something person-shaped. It slowly turned its head and looked right at me. Then I actually woke up, sweating and terrified, and the doll was sitting upright in the seat next to me, propped up like someone had placed her there. A few nights later, things got much worse. That evening, I put the doll back on the dresser and tried to act normal. I remember forgetting to take my melatonin that night, which may not matter, but I still remember it clearly. Sometime during the night, I woke up, or at least I thought I did. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Our house was small, so I could tell exactly where sounds were coming from. These footsteps were slow, heavy, and they were moving toward my mom's room. Then I heard her scream. It was sharp and sudden, and then it just stopped. Right after that, there was this awful chopping sound. The footsteps started again. This time, they moved toward my brother's room. There was no scream from him, just that same horrible slicing sound. I knew my room was next. I tried to move, tried to scream, tried to do anything, but my body wouldn't listen. I was completely frozen. The footsteps came closer and closer until they stopped right outside my door. Then the door creaked open. Something dark slipped into my room. I still don't know how to describe it. It wasn't fully solid, but it wasn't just a shadow either. It moved toward my bed like it knew exactly where I was. And then I woke up. It was morning. For a second, I was so relieved I almost laughed. The sun was coming through the window. Everything was quiet. And I thought it was over. Then I went to my closet to pick out clothes. The doll was inside. She was sitting there, staring straight at me. I know I had left her on the dresser. I know it. After that night, I wasn't willing to pretend it was nothing anymore. I told my mom, and thankfully, she believed me enough to let me get rid of it. Once the doll was out of the house, my sleep went completely back to normal. No nightmares, no sleep paralysis, no weird sounds, nothing. For years, I tried to convince myself it had just been my imagination. But last week, my grandma asked me to help her set up her booth at a thrift store. She was going through old boxes from her garage, pulling out things to sell, when she suddenly lifted something from the bottom of one box. It was the doll. My heart dropped. I asked her where she got it. She looked confused and said, "Your aunt asked me to give this to you years ago, but I forgot all about it." I just stood there, cold all over, because if that was the doll my aunt meant to give me, then what doll had been in my room when I was 9? My aunt passed away 2 years ago, so I can't ask her. And honestly, out of respect for her, I ended up taking the doll home. But now, it's here, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. I want to tell you about something that happened to my friend, Ty. I'll call him Ty here, because that's close enough to his real nickname without being exact. And before I get into it, I want to be clear about something. I'm not asking you to believe every part of this without question. I'm just telling you what happened as honestly as I can, the way I remember it, and the way it felt while we were living through it. Ty had this thing that followed him when he was younger. When he was a kid, he went through a long stretch where, every few nights, he would see something in his room. It always started in the same place, high up near the corner of the wall, where the shadows gathered thickest. He described it as a huge, black wolf's head, almost like a hunting trophy mounted on the wall, except alive. Its fur was dark and rough-looking, its eyes were yellow, and it moved like an animal. It would sniff the air, tilt its head, watch him from across the room. Most of the time it was only the head, but sometimes he said it seemed closer, like it had pushed farther out of the wall. Once or twice, he swore he saw claws stretch out from the darkness. The worst part was that it spoke to him. Not out loud exactly. He said it was more like words being pressed into his mind. It would tell him to do cruel things. Not anything like murder, nothing that extreme, but enough to make him meaner than he wanted to be. It would promise rewards if he listened, and sometimes, the next day, something strange would happen. He'd pass a test he should have failed. He'd win a race he had no chance of winning. Little things, but specific enough that they scared him. As Ty got older, it happened less and less. He made friends, got more grounded, and eventually, the wolf stopped showing up. For years, it became more of a weird old story among our friend group. Ty was never the kind of person who leaned into paranormal stuff. He was skeptical, practical, the sort of guy who would rather blame a bad dream than a demon. Then, last summer happened. Ty and I were working seasonal jobs near a state forest, staying in employee housing not far from the park entrance. One night, a group of us had a small party. We'd been drinking a little, smoking, and a couple of us took these tiny mushroom gummies someone had picked up. I'm not proud of that detail, but it matters to the story. None of us really hallucinated. We felt high, sure, but nobody saw anything strange. Nobody, except Ty. At some point, he and I got into an argument. Nothing world-ending, just one of those stupid late-night fights that feels bigger because everyone is tired and not fully sober. I left him alone in our room and went to cool off with the others. While I was gone, he called me several times. I didn't see the calls right away. Later, I listened to the voicemails and, honestly, I wish I hadn't. He sounded terrified. Not dramatic, not drunk, just scared in a way that makes your stomach drop. When Ty finally found me, he was pale and shaking. He told me the lights in the room had shut off by themselves. I can say this much. When I went back later, the lights really were off. He said the shadows pulled together near the ceiling, right beside the door. And then the wolf came back. Only this time, it wasn't just a head. He said the whole thing climbed out of the wall, too large for the room, bending its body at awful angles just to fit inside. It watched him from the corner, and then it reached for him. He felt claws around his throat. He thought it was choking him. Then, somehow, he realized the hands around his neck were his own. That realization snapped something loose in him. He managed to pull his arms away and stumble out of the room. Later that same night, something else happened that I still don't know how to explain. Ty opened his phone and found 3 new images in his camera roll. They looked like old AI-generated pictures, strange and dreamlike, but all 3 showed the same thing: a massive black wolf with yellow eyes. He didn't remember making them. Ty had used AI art apps before, mostly for game characters and fantasy stuff, so it wasn't impossible that he had generated them while out of it. But the details were wrong. The app listed in the image data was one he didn't have installed, and the creation date showed almost 2 weeks in the future. I know how that sounds. I know images can be faked. I know phones can glitch. I wish I still had them, but I deleted the copies I had because looking at them made me feel sick. I regret that now, because they were one of the only physical pieces of evidence we had. After that night, things got worse. A few days later, Ty was driving back from town through the park roads. It was late, and that stretch of road cut straight through dense trees. He said he had to brake because a large black wolf stepped into the road in front of his car. It had a dead fox in its mouth. The wolf sat down in the headlights and stared at him. Ty said that while it watched him, he felt breathing on the back of his neck from inside the car. Slow, hot, panting. He didn't turn around. He just sat there, frozen, until the wolf carried the fox back into the woods. Now, wolves do live in that region, so I can't call that part impossible. But the timing of it felt cruel. A few nights after that, we were hanging out in another friend's room. Ty started acting strange. He said he kept hearing birds hitting the window, over and over. He said they were crows. I asked how he knew that, and he just said, "I can tell." We had paint and paper out because a few of us were going to mess around with art. Without warning, Ty grabbed a tube of black paint and squeezed it across a sheet of paper. Then he smeared it with his fingers, fast and frantic, like he wasn't even seeing us. When he stopped, there was a wolf's head on the page. Not a perfect painting, but recognizable. Too recognizable. Ty blinked like he had just woken up. He looked down, saw what he'd made, and backed away from it. He didn't remember doing it. One of our friends took the paper outside and burned it. Around that time, a couple of friends who were into spiritual practices started trying to help. One of them handed Ty a bundle of sage in a store without telling him what it was. The second he smelled it, he panicked. He said he felt this crushing anxiety, like his body wanted to run and attack at the same time. The only thing that made the panic ease, he said, was thinking about violence. That scared him more than anything. Then came the nightmares. Ty started dreaming that he was being eaten alive. In other dreams, he would see a dark figure watching him from the edge of whatever scene he was in. Sometimes it repeated a phrase in a language he didn't recognize. He also told us he felt like the thing had a name. Gnaw. Not claw, not gnar, but gnaw. Like chewing. Like hunger. About a week and a half after the first night, everything came to a head. I was closing at work when Ty started texting me non-stop. He said he couldn't move. He said he needed help. I asked another friend to check on him, then left as soon as I could. When we got to him, he was shaken but conscious. After a while, he told us what had happened. He'd been lying in bed when he heard voices. Not one voice, but many. He described them as low, crowded, and hungry, arguing over which parts of him they wanted to eat first. While this was happening, he said his arms and legs stopped obeying him. They moved on their own, stiff and painful, while he lay there, trapped. Eventually, he blacked out or fell asleep, and he dreamed of a group of hooded figures chanting the same phrase he had heard in the earlier nightmares. This time, he remembered it. He wouldn't say it out loud. He texted it to me instead. Fartoyet Ernesten Klart, Father Loke. We looked it up. It was Norwegian. It means, roughly, the vessel is almost ready, Father Loki. That hit us hard. Ty has Scandinavian ancestry, but he doesn't speak Norwegian. He never studied it. And the spelling he sent was close enough that it didn't feel like random nonsense. Then we found the connection that made the room go cold. In Norse mythology, Loki is the father of Fenrir, the monstrous wolf. Fenrir is often described as massive, violent, and bound up with the end of the world. A black wolf, a hungry thing. A phrase about a vessel. I still don't know what to do with that. Later that night, our friends decided we should try cleansing the room. I grew up Catholic, so I was deeply uncomfortable with a half-improvised spiritual ritual happening in our employee housing bedroom. But Ty was my best friend. If he needed people with him, I was going to be there. They put salt by the door and window. They drew crosses and protective symbols on paper. They burned sage while Ty lay on the bed. At first, nothing happened. Then Ty got restless. His breathing changed. His body tightened. He started trying to slam his head back against the wall. Then he tried to choke himself again. We had to hold him down so he wouldn't hurt himself. The sage kept going out. Over and over, the flame would die like someone had pinched it. Ty grabbed some of the paper crosses and tore them apart. Then he started chanting the Norwegian phrase out loud. After that, he quoted a verse from Revelation, word for word. The part about standing on the sand of the sea and seeing a beast rise from the water with 7 heads. Ty is not someone who reads the Bible. Then he made this sound I still hate remembering. It was low and animal-like, somewhere between a growl and a word. He dragged it out slowly. No. And then, after a while, it stopped. Not dramatically. No burst of light. No final scream. He just calmed down. His body relaxed. His eyes cleared. I didn't feel like we had defeated anything. I didn't feel like some great evil had been banished. It was more like a storm had passed over the house and moved somewhere else. After that night, Ty didn't have another episode like it. At least, not one he told me about. I know there are other explanations. Maybe the mushroom gummy triggered something dormant. Maybe stress, substances, sleep paralysis, old childhood fear, and group panic all tangled together into one nightmare with teeth. I've thought about that a lot, but there are parts I still can't easily explain. The images on his phone, the phrase in Norwegian, the Bible verse, the wolf in the road, the way he looked when he came back to himself, confused and ashamed, like he had been dragged out of his own body and dropped back in. So I'm not here to tell you exactly what it was. I'm just telling you that something happened to my friend. And for a few weeks that summer, it felt like something old and hungry had remembered his name. Hi everyone. I wanted to share something honestly, and I'm hoping it lands with people who understand that not every experience fits neatly into the boxes we're usually handed. I'm 27, deeply intuitive, neurodivergent, and I've always felt connected to something beyond the ordinary framework of life. I've often described myself as a starseed and an empath, not because I need a label, but because those words come closest to describing the way my system seems to process the world. I've also been through a lot. My childhood was shaped by long-term emotional and physical abuse, medical trauma, and years of being misunderstood by systems that were supposed to help me. From a very young age, I was put through evaluations, treatments, and environments that felt frightening and invasive. By the time I was a teenager, I had already learned that adults could rewrite my reality and call it care, so my nervous system adapted. It had to. I became intensely observant. I learned to read faces, moods, rooms, silences, tiny shifts in tone, the atmosphere of a place before anyone even said a word. My mind became almost like a scanner, always gathering information, always trying to keep me safe. And over time, that survival skill became something much bigger. One of the strangest ways this shows up is through location. My brain seems to treat images and landscapes like puzzles. A while ago, someone posted a vague silhouette photo online. There were no obvious landmarks, just the outline of trees, a bit of shoreline, and the shape of the land. But something in my mind clicked. I started comparing the image with maps, rental listings, lake shapes, roads, and terrain. Within a short amount of time, I had narrowed it down to a specific lakeside property in Ontario, even though I had never been there. And this was not a one-time thing. It has happened many times throughout my life. I'll see a visual pattern and my mind starts stripping away the noise, almost automatically. It's like the ordinary world turns into layers of data, and my brain starts matching those layers until a location emerges. The second experience I want to talk about happened while I was driving. Since 2023, I've been practicing the law of assumption, especially around love, safety, and the feeling of already being chosen. There is an actor who became a huge catalyst for me, not just romantically, but emotionally. Something about him seemed to unlock old memories and buried grief from my childhood. That day, I was listening to a film score on repeat. Music helps regulate me. It gives my mind a rhythm to hold on to, almost like a thread through the storm. I was calm. I was aware of the road. I wasn't panicking or spiraling. But suddenly, part of my mind felt locked into place, almost frozen. Then I began speaking out loud, dictating what felt like a very specific argument between this actor and someone from his past. It did not feel like an ordinary fantasy. It did not feel like I was making it up to comfort myself. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional in the way I would expect. The words came through cold, direct, and strangely neutral, as though I was picking up on a scene happening somewhere else and simply translating it. Right around that moment, I noticed repeating numbers on license plates as I left a parking lot. My mind immediately registered them as signs, almost like confirmation points. And I know how that sounds. I really do. I know I'm conscious. I know I'm aware of myself. But carrying this kind of intense focus is exhausting. My body gets tired. My energy gets stretched thin. It feels like my attention is constantly reaching outward, tracking people, places, movements, possibilities, proof. And I'm starting to realize that maybe the deeper work is not about proving what I can perceive. Maybe the deeper work is learning how to come home to myself. Because focusing on the how, the where, the timing, or the actions of other people keeps me in a state of separation. It keeps my nervous system searching. And what I truly want is peace. I want stability. I want luxury, wealth, love, safety, and a life that feels soft in my own body. So I'm asking this with an open heart. Has anyone else with trauma, PTSD, neurodivergence, or intense sensitivity experienced their awareness becoming so strong that manifestation starts turning into tracking, scripting, or remote scanning? And if you have moved through that, how did you bring your focus back into yourself? How did you stop needing proof from the outside world? How did you teach a puzzle-solving mind to rest? I would really love to hear from people who understand this kind of inner wiring. Not judgment, not dismissal, just real experiences from others who have learned how to turn that powerful awareness inward and build a stable self-concept from there. Thank you for listening. I keep noticing this pattern. not only in soul journeys, but in everyday life too. People say they want guidance, they want signs, they want a clear answer. But then when the answer comes, they sometimes ignore it, or they only hear the part that feels convenient. For me, intuition, or the higher self, is not just about receiving a message. It is a skill. You have to learn how to listen without the mind rushing in and repainting the whole thing in its own colors. I learned this through many, many soul journeys. So often, the higher self says something like, "We did guide her, but she didn't fully listen." And it is never said with anger. It feels more like a calm, loving smile. Almost like, "Okay, this became part of the lesson too." There was one woman, let's call her Lila. She was living in Switzerland at the time. On paper, everything looked fine. She had a steady job, a decent apartment, a normal life. Nothing looked dramatic from the outside. But inside, she felt like she was slowly disappearing. She said every month felt heavier. Her energy felt flatter. Her body felt tired in a way sleep could not fix. It was like her inner light had been placed in a room with no windows. During the session, her higher self said that Switzerland was not truly aligned for her long term. It was too cold, too structured, too heavy for her nervous system. A warmer place in southern Europe would support her better. Portugal, southern France, Italy, somewhere with more sun, more softness, more life moving through the body. But there was one important detail. Her higher self said, "Prepare slowly. Do not rush. Let the timing open." After the session, Lila heard the part that said, "Go south." But somehow, she skipped right over the part that said, "Do not rush." Her mind was so desperate to escape the discomfort that it grabbed the beautiful part of the guidance and ran with it. And then, things became messy. The apartment search fell apart. The work situation became unstable. She met the wrong people. The timing felt blocked again and again. It was like trying to push through a door that was not locked, but also not ready to open. In the next session, her higher self came through again with that same calm presence. No judgment, no punishment. Just this clear message. You need to listen to the whole guidance, not only the part your desperate mind prefers. And that stayed with me, because intuition can say, "Yes, this direction is right, but wait." The mind says, "Now, I need relief now." Intuition says, "Prepare." The mind says, "I cannot stand this anymore." And that is where so many people get confused. Another woman, let's call her Mara, had a different lesson. When she was dating her now ex-husband, she had a strange feeling about him from the beginning. It was not dramatic. There was no thunder in the sky, no huge red flag waving in front of her face, just a quiet inner feeling. Something is off. But on the surface, he looked good. They liked many of the same things. He was charming, funny, attentive. He knew how to say the right words at the right time. So her mind started building a case for him. Maybe I'm just afraid. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I'm sabotaging something good. And little by little, she talked herself out of what she already knew. Later, she married him. They had a child together. And over time, she began to see what her body had sensed long before her mind had evidence. He had deeply manipulative patterns. A lot of his kindness was performance. He could be warm when it benefited him, and cruel when he wanted control. He twisted situations until she questioned her own memory, her own feelings, her own reality. Eventually, she left because the relationship was destroying her emotionally, mentally, and energetically. And when she looked back, she understood something very clearly. That first quiet feeling was not random. It was a warning before there was proof. And this is the difficult thing about intuition. The mind wants evidence first. But intuition often arrives before evidence. The mind says, "But he likes the same things as me." Intuition says, "Something is off." The mind says, "But this job is stable." Intuition says, "Your life force is shrinking here." The mind says, "But everyone thinks this is a good choice." Intuition says, "Maybe it is good for someone else, but not for you, or not right now." Of course, not every fear is intuition. Trauma can be loud. Anxiety can create false alarms. Old wounds can dress themselves up as guidance. That is why discernment is a practice. But real intuition usually has a different texture. It is quiet, clean, simple. Fear feels rushed. Desire feels gripping. Loneliness feels hungry. Pressure feels heavy. Real guidance has space around it. Lila's lesson was timing. Yes, but not yet. Mara's lesson was discernment. No, even if it looks good. Both of them received a signal, and both of them struggled because the mind had a louder story. I do not think the higher timeline means a perfect life with no pain and no problems. I think it means learning to cooperate with a deeper intelligence, one that can see further than the human mind can see in the moment. It means less unnecessary suffering, fewer wrong doors, fewer moments of, "I knew this, but I ignored it." Most of us were trained from childhood to override ourselves. Be practical. Do not be too sensitive. Do not be strange. Ignore your body. Ignore your gut. Choose what looks good on paper. And then years later, people wonder, how did I end up here? But often, there was a whisper long before. So maybe the question is, where in my life do I already know the truth, but I keep negotiating with it? And am I listening to the whole guidance, or only the part my mind wants to hear? I have a higher self-communion meditation in my profile for anyone who wants to practice this more deeply. But honestly, even 5 quiet seconds before a decision can show you a lot. Pause. Ask. Feel the first calm answer, and do not rush past it. I want to tell you about something that happened when my friend Mara and I drove out to Point Pleasant, West Virginia to visit the Mothman Museum. The drive started out normal enough. We were excited, joking around, talking about the museum and all the weird little bits of folklore tied to the area. But as we were leaving town, the GPS suddenly told us to go in a direction that felt completely wrong. We both kind of looked at each other, but we followed it anyway. I mean, the GPS usually knows better than we do, right? About 20 minutes later, it told us to turn down a road that just was not there. There was no road, no driveway, nothing that looked even close to a turn. The only place we could pull into was this small, ungated cemetery tucked off the side of the road. It was quiet, really still, and we figured we would just circle around and get back on the main road. But as we were turning around, Mara noticed a pile of feathers near the edge of the cemetery. Not just a few feathers scattered around. It looked like someone had dumped them there, almost like the remains of a whole bird, except there was no blood, no body, no mess. Just feathers. She got out and picked some of them up. I remember thinking that was strange, but before I could really say anything, she started walking toward the tree line. While she was looking around, she kept making odd comments about the headstones. She said things like, "Look, they died today," even though some of the stones didn't have death dates. Then she said, "It's their birthday." But it wasn't. Not according to the stone anyway. At the time, I thought maybe she was just reading them wrong. But later, when we were back in the car, she told me she had felt disoriented. detached, like she could hear me talking but the words weren't landing. She said it felt like she wasn't fully in reality, like she was dreaming with her eyes open. While she was near the trees, I started getting this awful feeling in my stomach. Not fear exactly, but that deep, heavy warning feeling you can't really explain. So I walked toward her. She was only a few feet away from me, standing by a creek just beyond the edge of the cemetery. She said it looked pretty and mentioned wanting to take pictures to send to her dad. Then, as I got close enough to be near her, she suddenly turned pale and looked startled. She said, "It ran off." I asked her what she meant. She said there had been a person there, or at least something shaped enough like a person that her brain tried to call it one. She said she had heard movement first, like something shifting in the brush. Then she saw a leg. Just one leg. Barefoot, hairless, extremely pale. It looked clean, which bothered her. She kept saying that part later. The leg was too clean for someone who had supposedly been standing in the woods near a creek. She said whatever it was had on bright blue pants, not jeans, but something much brighter. The pants looked torn or cut short enough that she could see part of the calf. And the second I walked close enough that it would have been able to see me, it ran. I never saw it, but I saw her face, and I felt that knot in my stomach tighten. That was when I told her to throw the feathers out of the car. She didn't want to. At first, she really didn't want to. She said they were beautiful and she wanted to keep them. But it wasn't just that. She admitted later that she felt like she needed to keep them, like there was some pull telling her not to let them go. I made her put them back outside before we left the cemetery. The second the feathers were out of the car, we got out of there. As we drove away, Mara looked back toward the place where she had seen whatever it was. There were no houses there, no shed, no yard, nothing. Just an open field and the woods beyond it. If a normal person had run that way, we should have seen them. We kept following the GPS, avoiding the road that didn't exist. About a mile later, we saw a historical marker and turned around to read it because it mentioned Mark Twain. After that, we went back the direction we had originally thought we were supposed to go. And later, we confirmed that our original route had been right all along. The GPS had taken us out there for no clear reason. Even after we left, Mara kept saying she didn't feel normal. She said she felt wrong somehow, out of it. Exhausted all at once, like the energy had just been drained from her. She even said she felt a little sick. I had never seen her like that before. I know there are a lot of strange stories tied to the Appalachian Mountains, and I know Point Pleasant already carries its own heavy folklore. But this felt different, quieter, stranger, like something wanted us to stop there, just long enough for Mara to notice it. And I still don't know what she saw. Have you ever come across the stories about St. Stephen's College in Stanley, Hong Kong? It looks peaceful at first, almost postcard-like. Old European-style buildings, sea air drifting in from the coast, quiet paths, and that calm atmosphere you'd expect from a historic school. But once you learn what happened there, the place starts to feel different, heavier, as if the walls had been listening for a very long time. The college was originally founded in the early 1900s and later moved to Stanley, where it became known for its beautiful campus. But during the Pacific War, that peaceful school was taken over and used as an emergency hospital by British forces. Then came December 25th, 1941. People later called it Black Christmas. Japanese soldiers entered the campus, even though Red Cross markings were supposed to show that the buildings were being used for medical care. What followed was horrifying. Wounded soldiers, medical staff, and nurses were attacked inside the hospital. Survivors later spoke of blood-soaked mattresses, bodies being carried outside, and fires built from broken furniture to burn what remained. After the war, when the site became connected with Stanley internment camp, prisoners reportedly gathered bones and fragments that were still left behind and buried them at Stanley Cemetery. So even now, when visitors walk along the campus heritage trail and see the memorials, they are not just looking at history. They are walking through a place that absorbed grief. And maybe that's why the ghost stories never really left. People say that late at night, especially between 2 and 3 in the morning, the parade ground sometimes comes alive with sound. Not voices from students, not footsteps from guards. Something more ordered than that. Marching. A steady rhythm of boots crossing the ground. Some caretakers have said they heard rough commands carried through the darkness, as though invisible soldiers were still drilling under orders from another time. But whenever someone tries to follow the sound, the ground is empty. No one is there. Just the wind, the old buildings, and the feeling that something has only just slipped away. Of course, some people explain it as echoes. The wooden structures, the open space, the sea breeze, maybe they all twist ordinary sounds into something strange. And that may be true. But others believe the marching is a memory that got trapped there. The dormitories have their own stories too. Students have talked about hangers swaying when there is no wind, clothes shifting as if someone brushed past them, and taps turning on by themselves in the middle of the night. Then there are the cries. Not loud screaming, exactly. More like low, broken sounds coming from empty corridors. The kind of sound that wakes you before you even understand what you're hearing. Some students say the moment they get up to check, everything stops. The hallway goes quiet. Too quiet. And that silence can be worse than the sound. One of the most unsettling legends is about a short path on campus. On a map, it should take almost no time to walk. Just a little over 100 meters. But students say that at night, the path feels wrong. A few minutes stretch out strangely. The lights seem to repeat ahead of you, one after another, making the walkway feel much longer than it should. Some people say it feels as if the path is folding in on itself, keeping you there longer than it wants to admit. And then there is the woman in white. The story goes that she appears ahead on the path, walking slowly, head lowered, hair falling forward so her face is hidden. She doesn't call out. She doesn't run. She just comes closer. Some say they felt the air turn cold as she passed. Others claim they felt strands of hair brush against their cheek, even though no one was beside them. A few have said she followed behind them for several steps before fading into the mist. No one really knows who she is supposed to be. Some believe she was a victim of the violence that happened there. Others think she is less a single spirit and more a shape given to the sorrow of the place itself. And honestly, that might be the most haunting idea of all. Because whether these stories are truly supernatural or not, the fear people feel there is real. Maybe it's caused by echoes, shadows, old architecture, and imagination. Maybe it's the mind reacting to a place with a painful past. Or maybe history leaves behind something we don't fully understand. St. Stephen's College is still a school today, still beautiful, still quiet in daylight. But beneath that calm surface, its past remains close. A boarding school became a hospital. A hospital became a massacre site. Later, it became part of an internment camp. That is a lot for one piece of land to remember. So when people talk about ghostly footsteps, strange cries, and a white figure moving through the night, maybe they are not only telling ghost stories. Maybe they are describing the way history refuses to disappear. And in Stanley, on that old campus by the sea, the past doesn't feel buried. It feels like it's still walking. I'll give you a little background first, because I think the history of the house matters. My dad, Daniel, was born there in the 1940s, back when the place was still split into two separate flats. His mom lived downstairs, and an older religious couple rented the upstairs flat from her. Later on, sometime in the 1970s, after that couple had both passed away, the two flats were joined together and turned into one large house. My dad moved out when he got married, but he came back about 20 years later. Eventually, the house was left to him in a will. He's in his 80s now, and apart from those years away, he's basically lived there his entire life. He's struggled badly with depression for as long as I can remember. He also hoards things, and the house has become very cluttered over the years. He doesn't really have the energy to clean or sort much out, and I'll be honest, we argue about it a lot. That's part of why I've started wondering whether something in that house has been weighing on him all this time. I don't know. I can't prove anything, but when I'm there, I find it very hard to stay calm around him, and the atmosphere just feels heavy. There's one story my dad told me that has always stayed with me. When he was a boy, the lady from the upstairs flat once asked him if he believed in life after death. He was young and skeptical, so he told her no. She said that when she died, she would prove it to him. Years later, she went into hospital for an operation and passed away. My dad didn't know she had died yet. That night, he came home, went into the backyard, and shut the gate behind him. He said the street light was shining on part of the shed door, and suddenly the light began to shift. Then it formed into a clear image of the woman from upstairs. He remembered what she'd told him when he was a child. He said the image stayed there for about a minute before the light seemed to scatter and fade away. He went straight inside and told his mom that the woman upstairs had died because he had just seen her. The next morning, her husband came downstairs and told my nan the news. The strange thing is, I don't actually think that woman is haunting the house. Most of what I've experienced there has felt male. I lived in that house for a while when I was in my teens, and there were moments I still can't explain. One time, I was in the house when it was empty, and I heard a man cough right beside me. Not outside, not through a wall, right next to me. It didn't feel terrifying exactly, just strange and very real. My grandfather died in that house from lung cancer, so I've wondered about that. My nan also died there. Another time, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a woman standing on the landing outside my bedroom door. I've also had something turn my bedroom door handle and try to get in. It sounded exactly like someone wrestling with the handle because the door was locked. My dad was working nights at the time, and there was no one else home. Years later, my dad told me the same thing had happened to him, even though his short-term memory isn't great, and he didn't seem to remember me ever mentioning it. My dog is another thing. She follows me everywhere, but in certain rooms at my dad's house, she gets distracted in a really unusual way. Sometimes she'll suddenly jump and look behind her, almost like something has brushed or stroked her back. Then last week, we were watching YouTube on the TV. I went to change it, but the remote wouldn't work. I assumed the batteries had died, but when my dad opened the back, the batteries had been turned around the wrong way. Neither of us had touched them. A few weeks ago, I was decorating at his house. My brother stopped by for a while, and then later we both went home. I've never thought my own house was haunted, but that night, standing in my kitchen, I suddenly had the strongest feeling that I was being watched. The whole room felt gloomy, almost pressed down. It was really unsettling. The next day, I went back to my dad's to carry on decorating, and he told me odd things had been happening there too. He'd heard footsteps in the hall and tapping behind his head while he was sitting down. Later that same day, my brother called me. He said his wife had been woken in the night by doors slamming in their house. My dad's house has always felt cold and dark. Upstairs, especially in the bathroom and the room that leads into it, I always feel like there's something there. The rooms feel full, even when they're empty. I get this strong sense of being observed. From what I understand, those rooms would have once been the lounge and kitchen of the couple who lived upstairs, including the woman who appeared to my dad after she died. There's always tension when I visit. It's like the disharmony rises up almost as soon as I walk in. Back in the 90s, we had a priest come out and say a prayer, but he wasn't a deliverance minister, and honestly, he didn't seem very confident about it. Whatever he did, it didn't really change anything. I'm trying to clear the place now. I've been slowly cleaning it out for the past 6 months, and I'm hoping that removing the clutter will help shift some of the energy. I've thought about smudging, prayers, maybe using the Lord's Prayer because there does seem to be a religious thread running through some of this. Mostly, I just want the house to feel lighter. I want peace in there. I want harmony back, if it ever really had it. And I'd be grateful for any genuine advice on how to cleanse the place properly and finally help whatever is lingering there move on. Okay, so I know this is going to sound strange, and honestly, I still don't fully know what to make of it, but I'm going to tell it the way it happened. I called this a precognitive dream, even though in a way, it feels like the opposite. That was just the closest label I could find for it. I don't usually have vivid dreams. Most of mine happen in the same 2 places, either my childhood home or my old elementary school. But about a year ago, I had this dream that took place in the driveway of the house I grew up in. In the dream, there was a little plastic kiddie pool beside me, and a hose was running into it. I was just standing there, waiting for it to fill up. I remember feeling impatient, like I had somewhere else to be. Then I looked over to my right, into the field beside the house. Standing out there was my childhood friend, Jame. He lived nearby when we were kids, but in the dream, he looked exactly like I remembered him from back then. Small, serious, kind of intense. He was pointing toward the edge of the woods across the field, toward this place where we used to play all the time. I shrugged at him, like, "What? What are you trying to tell me?" And then, without warning, he picked up a baseball and threw it straight at my forehead. That's when I woke up. At first, I thought it was just a weird dream, but then I had it again, and again, and again. By the 5th or 6th time, it didn't feel funny anymore. Now, there's some family history you need to know. For 3 generations, my family lived on that same piece of land. The road was even named after us. My great-grandfather farmed there, then my grandfather, and my dad grew up on that land too. Later, my dad took a different path in life, but he raised us in the same house he and his father had grown up in. After COVID, a bad storm came through and damaged the house pretty badly. Eventually, my uncles and a few others decided to tear it down. There's also this old family story, almost like our own private legend. Ever since my dad was little, he claimed he would see vehicles outside the house. Trucks and cars, just sitting there near the edge of the property, close to the field. He called them visitors. He said they weren't solid. They were kind of transparent, like phantoms. He saw them most often when he was young. He's in his 70s now and says he doesn't see them anymore. But there was one vehicle he saw more than the others. A red truck. That detail became such a familiar story in our family that it actually influenced my brother later. He ended up getting a red truck partly because my dad had talked about that phantom truck for so many years. So, back to the dream. Because I'm religious, I do believe dreams can sometimes carry more meaning than we understand. And after having that same dream over and over, I started wondering whether something was trying to push me back toward those woods. I didn't want to go alone. The place is way out in the middle of nowhere, and I hadn't been there in years. So I asked my brother to come with me, since he had played in those woods as a kid too. We drove out there, down this long dirt road, and eventually we saw the old tree line come up in the distance. But when we got there, something was wrong. The big tree we used to call the bent tree was gone. That tree was unforgettable. It had grown sideways at almost a perfect right angle, so you could climb up it like a ladder. As kids, we treated it like a fort, a landmark, almost like it belonged to us. But now it was just gone. Not fallen over, not rotted away. It looked like someone had come through with heavy equipment and ripped it out. The ground was torn up. Roots were exposed. Brush was scattered everywhere. We walked around for a while, looking for something, though I couldn't have told you what. Some clue, maybe, some sign. But all we found was dirt, trees, and that strange empty space where the bent tree used to be. Then it started raining, so we got back in my brother's truck and left to get lunch. Months later, my brother shaved his head. That's when we noticed a scar near the front of his scalp, just above his hairline. None of us had ever really seen it before. He asked our mom about it and she said, very casually, "That was from when Jame threw a baseball at you." Apparently when they were kids, Jame had thrown a baseball at my brother's head in the driveway. Same spot, same kind of injury. My brother didn't remember it at all. My mom said Jame had gotten really upset afterward. Not just sorry, but completely inconsolable. She had to take him home and talk to his dad. And that stopped me cold. Because in my dream, Jame had thrown a baseball at me. But the memory belonged to my brother. Jame was always a little unusual as a kid. I don't say that cruelly. He just seemed to experience the world differently. He used to say he saw shadows moving around his house in ways they shouldn't. He thought they were ghosts. Sometimes he would show up at our house in the middle of the day because he was too scared to stay in his own. I don't know much about what was happening in his home. I barely remember seeing his dad, and I don't remember his mom at all. His house is gone now too. It was torn down years before ours was. Jame moved away a long time ago, and I haven't been able to find him online or get in touch with him. So after we found out about my brother's scar, I started putting all the pieces together. My dad saw phantom vehicles as a child. Jame saw strange shadows as a child. The red truck my dad saw most often matched the truck my brother would eventually own. I had a recurring dream about one of my brother's forgotten memories. And in that dream, Jame pointed toward a tree that no longer exists. And I know how this sounds. I really do. But part of me wonders if Jame and my dad weren't seeing ghosts at all. Maybe they were seeing the future. Maybe my dad, as a little boy, saw my brother's red truck decades before it existed, parked out there during the demolition of the old house. My brother was there constantly during that cleanup, using that big diesel truck to haul things away. Of course, there's a weird loop in that, because my brother may have gotten the truck because of my dad's old story in the first place. So maybe it's a paradox. Maybe it feeds itself. I don't know. And with Jame, I wonder if something even stranger happened. What if, when he was pointing toward the woods all those years ago, he was seeing my brother and me in the future, standing near the place where the bent tree used to be? What if he thought we were ghosts? What if that's why he panicked? What if that's why he threw the baseball? I can't prove any of this. I know that. But I also can't shake the feeling that all of these things are connected somehow. And then there's the tree. Where did it go? Why would anyone haul equipment all the way out there, down a dirt road, just to tear out one old bent tree in the middle of nowhere? Everything else around it looked mostly the same. The house was gone, yes, but that tree was deliberately ripped out. I've tried checking old map images, but they're too blurry to tell when it happened. So now I'm left with the dream, the scar, my dad's red truck, Jame's shadows, and that empty patch of torn up ground where our childhood tree used to stand. And the question I keep coming back to is this: did the dream send us there because something wanted us to see what was missing? Or did we go there because, somehow, we already had? Lately, I've been thinking a lot about the patterns in my life. I still live at home with my parents and my two older brothers. I'm 32, and they're 34 and 36. None of us are married, and in my culture, it's pretty normal to stay with family until marriage, or unless work or school takes you somewhere else. But for us, none of those things really happened. We all work from home, so over time, we just stayed. And because of that, the house has become very routine-based. Almost too routine-based. My brothers have these very fixed schedules. They wake up around the same time, eat around the same time, work around the same time, even use the bathroom around the same time. It's so consistent that I'll run into them at these strangely exact moments, even when I'm not following a strict schedule myself. And I know that might sound like nothing, just a normal family crossing paths in the same house. But sometimes it feels too precise to be random. For example, one day I was driving back into the neighborhood, and at that exact moment, one of my brothers, Darren, was jogging down the sidewalk. We both ended up turning onto our street at the same time. Another time, I randomly woke up early on a Sunday, around 7:40 in the morning, just to use the downstairs bathroom. And right then, my dad walked in and went straight into the kitchen beside it. I know those things can be explained away as coincidence. I used to explain them away too. But then I remembered that my mom used to notice the same thing years ago when I was a teenager. She would say that my dad somehow came home at the exact same time I did, or at the exact same time one of my brothers did. She brought it up more than once, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Back then, I brushed it off. I thought she was reading too much into it. Now I'm not so sure. I've noticed similar things with my dad. There are so many little moments where we cross paths at strangely exact times, even when there's no obvious reason for it. And sometimes, especially when I'm in a good mood or really focused on something, it feels like he suddenly becomes more active around me. Like his presence shifts into the room right when I'm trying to settle into myself. And the more I've noticed it, the more unsettled I've felt. What's hard is that this same emotional pattern showed up in my last relationship too. I dated someone who reminded me a lot of my dad. He was very rigid in the way he thought. He rarely took accountability. He always needed to be right, even when the conversation wasn't about winning. He didn't have much of his own social life either, so it felt like he centered a lot of his world around me. And without meaning to, I found myself pushing him to be more ambitious, especially financially. That reminded me of the way my mom has pushed my dad over the years. It felt like I had somehow stepped into the same dynamic I grew up watching. That realization really bothered me. My ex, Adrian, would often wait around for me instead of building a fuller life of his own. And when we argued, it was exhausting. He would turn one specific issue into a broad generalization, almost like he was trying to dodge the part where he might have been wrong. Eventually, I realized I wasn't happy. I wasn't just unhappy with him. I was unhappy with the pattern. Because my dad can be like that too. He makes so much revolve around me, but then avoids taking real accountability. He'll playfully blame things on me in a way that's supposed to seem harmless, but after a while, it doesn't feel harmless. It feels familiar in a way I don't want. And that's what confuses me most. This doesn't feel like one isolated relationship. A lot of the men who've shown interest in me seem to carry some version of the same issues. Rigidity, emotional dependence, avoiding responsibility. wanting closeness but not really having their own foundation. So I've started wondering whether I'm part of the pattern too. Not in a blaming way, but in a serious way. Like maybe something in me recognizes this dynamic because it's familiar. And maybe familiarity keeps pulling me back toward people I don't actually want to build a life with. At the same time, I've seen examples of the kind of person I do want. Someone like Adrian's younger brother, for instance. He seemed more grounded, more independent, more capable of carrying himself. Seeing that made me feel like what I want does exist. It's not imaginary. But somehow, it still feels just out of reach. So overall, I feel stuck. I'm still living at home, surrounded by routines that feel repetitive and hard to breathe inside. I keep noticing these strange overlaps, these emotional echoes, these dynamics that seem to repeat themselves in my family and in my dating life. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how to step out of it. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough to start feeling like my life is actually becoming mine. I need to talk about something that happened last week because, honestly, I still don't know what to make of it. I'm in my 40s and I've never dealt with hallucinations before. I'd say I'm a sensitive person, pretty open-minded, but also fairly grounded. My partner and I have been together for about 20 years, and last week we decided to do mushrooms again. It wasn't our first time, but it had been a long while. Where we live in the Midwest, they're kind of in that gray area legally, so he went to a shop and picked some up. The second night we took a little more, and everything was completely normal, nothing strange at all. But the first night, we only took a small amount. He ate one mushroom, maybe 3 inches long, and I had 2 little caps, about the size of a dime and a nickel. We also each had a 25 milligram edible, which usually wouldn't do much to me since I normally take closer to 100 milligrams. He had a couple of beers too, and after a while he fell asleep on the couch. The couch is near the open doorway to the kitchen, so from where I was sitting at the kitchen table, I could only see his feet. I was coloring at the table, just completely in my own little world. I can do that for hours when I get focused. The TV was across from me in the living room, maybe 15 feet away. Big screen. I think something like The Boys was playing. And the thing is, I didn't really feel like I was tripping. I just felt very calm and focused. I remember sitting there thinking about microdosing more often, just kind of staring into the living room. Then I saw it. A black shadow came out of my partner. I know how that sounds, believe me, I do. But it was so clearly shaped, human-shaped. I could make out the head, shoulders, arms, torso, and even the legs, though the legs weren't as clear. It came out with this sudden force, almost like it had been thrown backward. Its arms were windmilling like it was trying not to fall, and then it moved toward the hallway and disappeared. The TV was backlighting the whole thing, which is probably why I saw it so clearly. It wasn't solid exactly. It looked kind of smoky or misty, but the outline was sharp. The edges were darker than the rest, almost like it had a darker shadow around its shadow. No hair, no face, just this man-shaped darkness. At first I thought, okay, the mushrooms are doing what mushrooms do. I'd never seen anything like that before, especially on such a small dose, so part of me was actually curious. But then, I felt this very strong urge to get up. It didn't feel like a normal thought. It felt like something inside me said, "Go, do it now." So I went into the living room, stood over my sleeping partner, and told whatever it was that it needed to leave. I told it it wasn't welcome in our home. Then I made the sign of the cross over him. And that's when the whole feeling changed. I went back to the kitchen table. My dog was standing about 5 feet in front of me, right in the doorway, and we were both facing the living room. It honestly felt like we were waiting for something. Then that thing came around the corner. It moved toward my dog like it was going to hit him. It stomped, or at least made a motion like stomping, and raised both fists. It lowered itself right into my dog's face, and my dog reacted. He pulled his head back fast, exactly like he was seeing what I was seeing. That was the moment I stopped feeling curious. Before that, I could still tell myself it was just the mushrooms. But when my dog reacted, I got scared. I said again, louder this time, "You don't belong here. Leave." Then I grabbed a hammer, which I realized sounds ridiculous. I don't know what I thought I was going to do with a hammer against a shadow, but I was scared, and my brain just went for the nearest solid object. After that, it moved toward the fridge. I couldn't see it clearly anymore, but there was this loud bang, like something hit the refrigerator. Both dogs started barking like crazy. We have 2 dogs, but it had only gotten in the face of one of them. My partner slept through the whole thing. Didn't stir, didn't wake up, nothing. And the entire thing happened fast. From the moment I saw it come out of him to the bang near the fridge, I'd say it was maybe 3 minutes. I'm not deeply religious. I believe more in reincarnation than anything else. But after that, I found myself looking up prayers. I walked through the house saying an exorcism prayer I found online, because I honestly didn't know what else to do. And I know how this sounds. It sounds absurd. It sounds like the kind of story people roll their eyes at. I thought maybe I was just going to end up with a strange mushroom story. But then my dog reacted, and that changed everything for me. Since I told it to leave, the house does feel quieter. More peaceful, maybe. The dogs had been barking at random things a lot lately, and that seems to have settled down some. Now I'm sitting here wondering what actually happened. Was it something connected to my partner? Was he having some kind of out-of-body experience and I interrupted it? Was it something darker? Should I bless the house? Should I put crosses above the doorways? I just don't know. And just to be clear, we're not reckless people. We don't do hard drugs. No meth, no crack, no coke. Just weed, mushrooms once in a while, and some alcohol. He works full-time doing windshield repair. I work in retail management. We have a 4-bedroom home, and 1 teenager still living with us. I'm saying that because I want it understood that I'm a responsible, clear-headed person. But this happened. And now I'm trying to figure out what I saw, what my dog saw, and what I'm supposed to do next. I was 12 when it happened, and even now, at 18, I still don't sleep with my window open. I had just come back from a holiday in Malta, and while I was there, I'd made friends with a boy named Luca. We'd been messaging after I got home, just normal holiday friend stuff, and that night, I was lying on my bed texting him on my old iPhone. My bedroom was small back then. The bed was quite high up and pushed right against the window, so when I was lying there, the window was basically beside me. There were 3 panels of glass, and the 2 side panels could open outward. That night, both of them were open as wide as they could go. My curtains were the kind that split in the middle and pulled out to each side, and they were partly drawn. I remember hearing the curtains move. At first, I just glanced up and thought it was the wind. But when I think back to it now, it didn't look like a normal gust moving fabric. It looked more like someone had gently pulled the curtain to one side, without actually dragging the whole thing across the rail. Just this strange little shift, like fingers had touched it. I ignored it. I went back to texting. Then, a few seconds later, I heard this soft sound on the bed beside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of sound a mattress makes when weight is put onto it. I looked to my left, and I saw the mattress pressing down. There was no foot there, no person, nothing I could see. But the mattress was dipping exactly like someone had stepped onto it with their full weight. My teddy bear was beside me too. and its face was being pushed down into the bed at the same time. That was the moment my brain seemed to put everything together. The curtain, the sound, the mattress, the teddy bear. And I just knew something was there. This wave of pins and needles shot through my whole body, from the front of my face all the way through to my back. It wasn't like a normal shiver. It felt like my body had been plugged into fear. I screamed. I jumped up and ran straight into my parents' room. After that, my memory gets blurry. I don't remember exactly what everyone said that night, but I remember what it did to me afterward. I told my family what had happened. I was already a nervous kid, the kind who slept with the bedroom door open and a light on outside the room. But after that, I couldn't sleep in my own bed for a long time. I kept asking my mom to get someone to help, though I didn't really know what I meant by that. At one point, she asked if I wanted a priest to bless the room. I think she may have been half joking, but I begged her to do it. Nothing ever really came of it. Later, she told me she had spoken to someone from the church, and they said there was no ghost and nothing to cleanse. I remember feeling so disappointed, because to me it had been real. It wasn't a bad dream. I wasn't half asleep. I wasn't imagining it. I even told Luca about it afterward. I remember sending him a video where I asked my sister to confirm that I had told everyone what happened, just because I wanted someone to believe me. I don't have that old account anymore, so I don't know if I could ever get the video back. Not long after, I switched rooms with one of my siblings. I don't think it was even that late when it happened, maybe around 9 or 10 at night. That almost makes it feel stranger to me, because it wasn't some middle-of-the-night nightmare moment. I still don't have an explanation. All I know is that I saw my mattress sink under invisible weight, right beside me, and I have never been comfortable sleeping with an open window since. So, for my birthday in October 2024, my partner and I decided to go to New Orleans for a long weekend. She had been there once before, but for me, it was the first time, and I was excited in that wide-eyed, I'm about to eat too much and believe in ghosts for 3 days kind of way. We flew in on a Thursday morning and stayed until Sunday. Our Airbnb was in an old renovated building on Dumaine Street, right in the French Quarter. We were in room 6. And honestly, the place was beautiful. It had that old New Orleans charm, high ceilings, antique-feeling details, the kind of building that seems like it has heard 100 years of secrets and decided to keep most of them. That first day was completely normal. We landed late in the morning, dropped our bags off before check-in, went to Pat O'Brien's for lunch, wandered around Bourbon Street for a bit, and later that night, we did one of those haunted history tours where they walk you around the quarter and tell you all the stories attached to the old buildings. By the time the tour ended, we were exhausted. It was around 11 at night, so we went back to the Airbnb, got ready for bed, and fell asleep around 11:30. Now, before I get to the strange part, I need to say this clearly. I am not a sleepwalker. I never have been. And my partner, who I'll call Lena, is an incredibly light sleeper. If I get up in the middle of the night and the floor creaks once, she wakes up. So what happened next has never really made sense to either of us. Sometime around 2 in the morning, I woke up standing in a room I did not recognize. Not sitting up in bed, not half awake near the bathroom. Standing, fully upright, in a completely different room. I had no memory of getting out of bed. No memory of opening our door. No memory of walking up or down stairs. No memory of entering another room. Nothing. The first thought I had was strangely calm. I remember thinking, I could be in some random building across New Orleans right now, and I'd have no idea how to get back. And then, instead of panicking like a normal person probably would, I thought, I should figure out where I am before I freak out. It was like my brain refused to accept what my eyes were telling it. I was standing near the entrance of this room, angled enough that I could see most of it, but everything was wrong. Our room had 2 queen beds. This room had a couch where the beds should have been. Our room had tall windows and a balcony door overlooking Dumaine Street. This room had small rectangular windows along a shorter wall. Our room had a kitchenette near the entrance. This room didn't. The ceilings were different too, lower, maybe even vaulted, though for some reason that didn't really register in the moment. I was too focused on the layout. I kept trying to make the room become familiar, like if I stared long enough, it would rearrange itself into the room I had fallen asleep in. I started walking around, still in this thick fog of confusion. I went toward where our bathroom should have been, but instead I found a little hallway. On one side there was a bathroom, and on the other side there was a small kitchen with counters, a sink, a dishwasher, a little stovetop, cabinets, the whole thing. There was also a window, and when I looked out, I could see the lights of downtown New Orleans. That gave me some sense of direction, but it didn't make me feel better. The whole time I had this awful sensation that I was a passenger in my own body. I could understand what I was seeing, but it felt distant, like my thoughts were in the back seat and my body was driving without asking permission. I'd think, I should walk over there, and then my legs would just do it. Eventually, I came back into what I realized was a living room. I was still looking for one thing, anything, that would prove I was actually in the right place. Then I saw a set of doors on the opposite side of the room. They looked enough like the bathroom doors in our room that my half-panicked brain latched onto them. I thought, okay, maybe that's the bathroom. Maybe if I open those doors, Lena will be in there, and everything will snap back into place. So I walked over and pushed the doors open. And it was not the bathroom. It was a bedroom. A long, narrow room, maybe 15 feet long and 8 feet wide. At the far end there was a bed, and on that bed was a man. He was lying there in the strangest position, like he had sat down on the edge of the bed and then fallen backward into sleep. His legs were hanging off from the knees down, and his arms were stretched out to the sides. He looked older, maybe mid-50s or 60s. Bald, larger build, maybe some stubble on his face. That part is a little blurry now, but the image of him on that bed is still burned into me. Then he sat up. I can't remember if he startled awake and jerked upright, or if his body slowly bent up at the waist in that unnatural horror movie way. I only remember the moment he was sitting there, looking at me. That was when reality finally broke through. I was in the wrong room. I started panic explaining. I told him I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know where I was. I told him I was supposed to be in room 6. And this man, who should have been screaming, threatening to call the police or throwing me out, just looked at me and said in the calmest, flattest voice, "You're in room 7. That was it. Not, "Who are you?" Not, "How did you get in here?" Nothing else. Just, "You're in room 7. I remember saying something like, "Room 7? How did I get here? I'm not supposed to be here." Then the next thing I knew, I was outside the door. I don't remember turning around. I don't remember grabbing the handle. I don't remember walking out. 1 second I was in that room with him, and the next I was standing in the hallway with the door closed behind me. There was no yelling, no footsteps rushing after me, no lock clicking, no threats, just silence. I looked toward the windows and finally understood where I was. I was 1 floor above our room, near the top of the staircase. I ran down those stairs as fast as I could. When I found room 6, I was so shaken that I traced the number on the door with my finger to make sure it was really ours. Then I started pounding on the door. Closed fist, knees, feet, whatever. I was desperate to get inside. For a second, I worried I was going to wake up the whole building and get us kicked out. But honestly, at that point, seeing another living person felt better than being alone in that hallway. After maybe 45 seconds, though it felt much longer, I heard Lena's voice from inside. "Hello?" And I was so freaked out that I didn't even say, "It's me." I just managed to breathe out, "Let me in." Thankfully, she recognized my voice and opened the door. She was standing there holding a fire extinguisher like it was the only weapon available in the room, which, to be fair, it was. She had woken up to me pounding on the door and realized I wasn't in bed. Her first thought was that someone had broken in, taken me, and come back for her. I told her I had woken up standing in the room above us, and that was when I realized I was soaked. My shirt, pajama pants, underwear, everything was drenched in cold sweat. The part of the bed where I had been sleeping was soaked too. We were both terrified. Lena wanted to leave immediately, pack up, change flights, go home right then. But it was around 3 in the morning in New Orleans, and I told her we shouldn't go outside in that state. There weren't any flights anyway, so we decided to stay in the room and wait until morning. I got back into the wet side of the bed, which was just as miserable as it sounds, and started searching for anything about the building. Hauntings, strange history, paranormal stories, anything. The only thing I found was some mention of a little girl ghost who supposedly moved things around. Nothing about possession. Nothing about an older man. Nothing about people waking up in the wrong room. I'm not especially religious. I was raised loosely Catholic, but I never really stayed connected to it. Still, I fell asleep repeating the one prayer I could remember, because at that point, I was ready to accept help from any department of the invisible. The next morning, we woke up and barely spoke. We made coffee and went for a walk. Eventually, we ended up sitting quietly in Jackson Square, trying to talk ourselves into a rational explanation. Maybe I sleepwalked for the first time in my life. Maybe I somehow guessed the code to another door. Maybe someone left a room open. Maybe my brain invented half of it. None of those explanations felt right, but we decided to push it aside and enjoy the trip. We also stopped at Marie Laveau's shop, which I know is touristy, but in that moment it felt like the only place we knew to go for some kind of protection. We bought this little blue stone with instructions to dissolve it in water and place the mug under the bed to ward off bad energy while sleeping. And honestly, nothing like that happened again. Later, we started trying to make light of it. We decided that if there was something in the room, we should probably get on its good side. We jokingly named it Gus because calling it the entity felt like giving it too much power. There was a little round table near the windows, so we made that the offering table. I figured if Gus was old, maybe he hadn't had a drink in a while, so I opened a canned seltzer and left it there. Then I added a nicotine pouch, because apparently my ghost diplomacy strategy was gas station charcuterie. It felt ridiculous, but also weirdly right. The next morning, we kept the bit going and left a cup of coffee on the table for Gus. That was when the second strange thing happened. I took a coffee cup from a drawer in the kitchenette, walked it over to the offering table, set it down, and started walking toward the bathroom. The moment my leg lined up with the drawer I had just opened, it slid out smoothly and gently bumped my left leg mid-stride. Not slammed, not jerked, just opened and tapped me. Lena didn't see it happen, but I told her right away. And somehow, instead of being terrified, we both got excited. It felt like a response, like a little thanks, or maybe even an apology for whatever had happened the first night. The strangest part came later, though. That same morning, we realized there was construction going on in the room above us. There wasn't supposed to be a guest staying there. We hadn't seen anyone coming or going the entire time. Eventually, I went upstairs to look at the room again. No one was there. and the door number was not 7. It was 9. Every room in the building had a digital lock that required a code. I still have no idea how I got inside that room. I don't know why the man said it was room 7. I don't know why I saw him there at all. After we got home, I looked up the Airbnb again. The updated pictures showed the room above us after renovation, and the layout matched what I remembered. The kitchen, the living room, the shape of the space, all of it. But some details had changed. The doors I pushed open to find that bedroom were gone. The furniture was different. There were rugs and tables that hadn't been there when I saw it. I still haven't found any other stories like mine about that building. The historic New Orleans Voodoo Museum is right next door, which may mean nothing, but after that weekend, it's hard not to let your mind wander. I know how strange it sounds. I know there are probably people who will say I sleepwalked, dreamed it, or filled in the blanks afterward. But I can still close my eyes and see that room. I can still feel the hallway outside the door. And I can still hear that man's voice, calm as anything, telling me, "You're in room 7. The wildest part is that I still love New Orleans. Lena and I have even talked about going back in October. And, believe it or not, part of us is curious enough to stay in that building again. So, about 2 weeks ago, I started this new job at one of those department stores that's still hanging on inside a mall. You know the kind. Big building, tons of floor space, kind of quiet in a way that feels normal during the day, but completely different once everyone leaves. At first, everything felt pretty regular. Honestly, I actually liked the job. The benefits were solid. Paid vacation, double pay on Christmas, and a few other holidays, plus a pretty good discount on clothes. I'm 23, Latino, living in Texas, so that kind of stuff matters. A decent job with benefits is not something I'm going to complain about. The work itself is simple enough. I help the sales associates when they need something, troubleshoot little issues, make sure the store stays clean, and handle opening or closing tasks. Most of the heavier stuff happens before people arrive or after everyone is gone. Usually, I have another person working with me, but the store is huge. Like, huge enough that you can both be on the same shift and still not see each other for almost the whole night unless you're doing something together or calling for help. I don't scare easily, but I'll admit, being alone in a big, empty store can feel strange. Especially when I have to go into the back stock rooms. There are these long hallways and connected rooms, and sometimes you have to walk through 3 or 4 areas just to grab one piece of equipment. I always told myself it was just that weird feeling people get in liminal spaces. I figured it was nothing, just my brain being dramatic. By the end of my first week, I was starting to get comfortable. I knew where things were, I had the routine down, and I felt like I was getting the hang of it. Then that Sunday happened. We close earlier on Sundays, and part of my job that night was polishing the floors with this big floor cleaning machine. It's basically this bulky mop machine that you push through the whole store. It takes forever. There were 3 of us closing that night, and somehow we decided to settle the chores with rock, paper, scissors. I lost, of course. One coworker got the restrooms, the other handled the doors, and I got stuck with the floor machine. They left around 6:10 or 6:15. But I couldn't start right away because there was still this older woman wandering around like she didn't realize the store was closed. Once she finally left, I got going. It was probably around 6:25 by then. I put my headphones on and started on the first floor. Everything was fine. Quiet, empty, normal. After I finished that level, I took the elevator up to the second floor. Now, the second floor is usually dead after closing. It's mostly home goods and some clothing sections, and those departments don't take as long to shut down. The sales associates up there are usually gone pretty quickly, unlike downstairs where they sometimes stay late counting cash. So I wasn't expecting to see anyone. I started running the machine near the middle of the store, close to the escalators, and that's when I saw it. Across the floor, several clothing racks moved. Not just a little shake either. They moved hard, fast, violently. The clothes swung, the hangers clattered, and it looked like something had rushed between the racks. The best way I can describe it is like an animal had darted through the aisles, low and quick, except I didn't see an animal. I froze. For a second, I just stood there with my hands on the machine, trying to understand what I had just seen. Then I pulled my headphones off, because whatever had moved through there had made enough noise that I could still hear the hangers rattling. I texted my coworkers right away and asked if they were messing with me. While I was waiting for them to respond, I looked over the railing toward the first floor. It looked empty. Then I saw one of the sales girls leaving, so I called down and asked her if anyone was still upstairs. She looked confused and said no. I asked if there were any customer service people still around, or anyone else closing besides me. She said the only person left was the closing manager. That's when I felt the goosebumps start. Real ones. The kind that make your skin feel too tight. I looked back toward the racks, but nothing came out. Nobody walked away. Nobody ran. No customer. No associate. Nothing. And listen, I was not about to go investigate like I was in some cartoon mystery. I know better. I'm Latino. We do not go chasing weird noises after closing in an empty store. That is how you become the warning story. I did walk around a little, just enough to see if maybe someone was hiding or trying to sneak out. I thought maybe it was a customer trying to steal, or an associate rushing through to grab something. But there was no one. The customer elevators had already been turned off, so the only way down would have been the escalator or the employee area in the back. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear footsteps. I didn't hear a door. Just the last little clinking of hangers settling back into place. After that, I cut the job short. I took the machine back, went straight down to the employee area, and stayed there until the closing manager was ready to leave. When we walked out, it was just the two of us, and I still have no idea what moved those racks. I need to tell you about something that happened with my cat, because I still don't really know how to explain it. She's white and gray, with this unusual pattern in her fur. I've only ever seen one other cat online that looked even close to her. She's usually my little shadow. She follows me from room to room, yells at me for attention, asks for pets constantly, and she's honestly one of the sweetest, silliest little creatures I've ever known. But a few nights ago, I was in the kitchen making food, and out of nowhere, this awful feeling came over me. It was dread. Pure dread. I suddenly felt like I was being watched, and not in a normal way. It felt like something terrible was about to happen, like I had 1 second before everything went wrong. I started looking around the kitchen, trying to figure out what had set me off. And then I saw her. My cat, or what looked exactly like my cat, was standing on top of the laundry basket. I can't explain this next part in a way that makes sense, but the second I saw her, my heart just dropped. I felt the most intense fear I have ever felt in my life. She didn't look injured. She didn't look distorted. She didn't look strange at all, at least not on the outside. But something about her felt wrong. And my cat has startled me before. She sneaks around, she pops up in weird places, she does all the normal cat things. But this was different. This wasn't a quick scare. This was my body telling me very clearly that something was not right. Still, I tried to act normal. I started talking to her the way I always do, telling her she was pretty and sweet, using that ridiculous voice people only use with their pets. Then I walked over to the drawer where I keep her food packets. Normally, she would have launched herself off whatever she was standing on and come running over, meowing like she hadn't eaten in 3 years. Even when she doesn't want food, she still comes over just to rub against my legs. But she didn't move. She just stood there on the laundry basket, staring at me. I poured some food into her bowl. Still nothing. At that point, I was still shaking, but I started worrying about her more than myself. I thought maybe she was sick, or maybe she'd hit her head somehow. So I went into the living room, sat down, and patted my lap, calling her over. Nothing. She didn't blink much. She didn't meow. She didn't shift her weight. She just kept watching me. So I got up and slowly walked toward her, asking, "Are you okay, baby?" I reached out to pet her head, and she hissed at me. She didn't swat. She didn't crouch. Her ears weren't flat. Her tail wasn't puffed up. Her back wasn't arched. She didn't look scared or defensive at all. She just hissed. That was when the fear came back in full force, because my cat has never hissed at me. Not once. She's too affectionate, too trusting, too goofy. She's not a graceful, mysterious creature. She's a soft little gremlin who sometimes forgets how furniture works. But this cat looked aware. That's the only word I can think of. Observant. Calm. Almost like it was studying me. And my gut was screaming, that is not her. But what was I supposed to do? It looked exactly like my cat. So I backed away, because I didn't want to frighten her if she really was hurt or confused. I went back to cooking, but the whole time I kept glancing over at the laundry basket. She never moved. After a while, I started feeling guilty. I thought, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe she's sick and I'm making it worse by acting afraid of her. So I started talking to her again, softly this time, calling her sweet names, telling her it was okay. She didn't make a single sound. I tried looking her over from a distance, but she seemed completely fine. No blood, no limp, no strange posture, nothing. Eventually, I gave up and took my plate into the living room. And then she meowed. My heart sank all over again. It sounded like my cat, but it was wrong. Not wildly different, not like some movie monster imitation, just wrong enough that every part of me knew. That was not my cat. Whatever concern I had for her disappeared in that moment. I opened the front door and started shouting at it to get out. I grabbed the mop and waved it near the laundry basket, even smacking the basket a couple of times to scare it away. And it didn't react. No panic, no scrambling. No flattened ears, no puffed tail, nothing. It just watched me. I kept at it for maybe half a minute, and then finally, very calmly, the cat jumped down from the basket and walked out the front door like it had simply decided it was done being there. The second it left, I slammed the door, locked it, and sat down in the living room. The fear was gone almost instantly, and then I felt horrible. I thought I had just screamed at my own cat in some paranoid, irrational moment. I sat there staring at nothing, feeling sick with guilt. A few minutes later, I heard a soft little thump from the kitchen. I looked over, and there was my cat, standing on the counter. This time I felt nothing. No fear, no dread, just shock. She saw me looking at her, jumped down, ran straight to me, and started meowing and rubbing all over my legs like she always does. Loud, affectionate, needy, completely normal. That was my cat. I keep trying to explain it logically. Maybe it was a stray that somehow looked almost identical to her. Maybe I was tired and my brain filled in the rest. But I can't make it fit. No strange cat should have been that calm in my house. No stray should have stood there like that while I shouted and waved a mop near it. And I've been around cats my whole life. I've cared for strays, even feral ones. I adore cats. There is no reason I should have felt that kind of terror from one. But I did. And whatever that thing was, it looked exactly like her. I want to tell you about a story they still whisper around Sayward, especially when the fog comes in thick and the trees go quiet. Back in the early 1700s, that place wasn't the peaceful trail people know today. It was raw country, hard country, the kind of place where the rain seemed to live in your bones and the forest could make a person feel very, very small. There was a woman named Elizabeth who came there with her husband, Simon. She hadn't been raised for that kind of life. She remembered open fields, softer weather, the sound of people nearby. But out there, on the edge of northern Vancouver Island, all she really had was their little cabin, the fire in the hearth, and her baby boy, Rowan. And she loved that child more than anything. But loneliness can do strange things to a person. So can silence. And when trust breaks, sometimes it doesn't shatter loudly. Sometimes it arrives in small, cruel pieces. For Elizabeth, it started with the smell of unfamiliar flowers on Simon's coat. Flowers that didn't grow anywhere near Sayward. Then came the distance in his voice, the way he turned his face from her, the way he seemed to be somewhere else even when he was standing right beside her. Then one day, she followed him. She found him with another woman beneath the cedars, and something inside her simply gave way. People say it wasn't just jealousy, it wasn't only heartbreak. It was the long winter, the isolation, the fear, the feeling that the whole world had closed its fist around her. In that broken moment, Elizabeth's mind turned against her. She looked at her life and saw no way out. And in one terrible act, lost in rage and despair, she took the life of the child she loved most. The cabin fell silent after that. No crying, no movement. Just the rain tapping on the roof, steady as a finger on a coffin lid. When Elizabeth understood what she had done, she ran. She didn't run toward help. She didn't run toward the settlement. She ran upward, through the wet brush and black roots, toward the cliffs above the Seymour Narrows. The water below was violent that day, twisting and roaring around the rocks, almost as if the sea itself knew what had happened. When she reached the overlook, she stood there, with the wind tearing at her dress, staring down into the churning water. Then she looked at her arms. Empty. That was when she screamed. They say the sound carried through the trees and over the water, so sharp and full of grief that even the wolves stopped howling. And then she stepped off the cliff. Now, the Ripple Rock Trail is beautiful. People hike it for the views, for the sea air, for that wild feeling you only get when the land drops away beneath you. But some hikers say there are places on that trail where the air changes. They hear a faint clinking sound, like old metal keys swinging from a woman's belt. They feel a sudden cold, even in summer, as if something has passed right through them. And on foggy evenings, some say they've seen her. A woman in a torn gray dress standing near the edge of the bluff. She doesn't look out at the water. She looks down at her arms, holding them as though a baby should still be there. The old people used to say you shouldn't go to the overlook after dark. Not because of the cliff, not because of the trail, because Elizabeth is still there, still searching the fog, still listening for the child she lost. So last night, something tried to follow me into my dreams. I know that sounds dramatic, but I don't really know how else to say it. There's been something in my house for about 5 months now. I've been calling it a mimic because that's the closest word I have for what it does. It copies people, their sounds, their routines, their voices. But until last night, it had never tried anything like this. For context, I'm 16. I live with my parents and my little sister, and sometimes my grandparents come stay with us for a few weeks at a time. I've had strange experiences for as long as I can remember, mostly hearing things other people don't seem to notice. I've kind of accepted that about myself. I've always felt more tuned in through sound, if that makes sense. At first, what was happening in the house didn't scare me too much. I'd be home alone and hear grocery bags crinkling in the kitchen, like someone was unpacking food. I'd hear the sunroom door open and close, the way it does when my grandmother steps outside. Sometimes I'd hear footsteps or little movements in rooms I knew were empty. I tried to explain it away. We have neighbors downstairs, so maybe sound was traveling weirdly. Maybe the house was settling. Maybe I was just tired. And honestly, I wasn't home much anyway. I was staying late after school almost every day for a theater production, sometimes not getting back until close to 11 at night. My dad was helping with the same show, and my stepmom would usually be out in the garage working on her writing, so the house already had this strange, half-empty feeling most nights. But then, it started using voices. That was different. One day, I was completely alone, and I heard my stepmom call me from another room. Clear as anything. Not muffled, not distant, not something I could mistake for the neighbors. It was her voice, calling for me. Except she wasn't home. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just random noises. Something was imitating my family. So I decided not to feed into it. I ignored it as much as I could, and I cleansed the house because that felt like the obvious thing to do. After that, I was barely home for about 3 weeks because rehearsals got intense, and part of me thought maybe starving it of attention would make it weaken. It didn't. When I finally had a quiet evening at home, my boyfriend, Theo, came over and we were cooking together. We were just talking like normal when he suddenly froze and stared toward the sunroom. His face went pale. He said he saw what looked like my grandmother standing there, but not really her. The posture was wrong. Too stiff, too straight, and the face looked warped somehow, like it was trying to arrange itself into someone familiar, but didn't fully understand how. A few seconds later, my real grandmother came back inside from her smoke break. So whatever he saw, it wasn't her. After that, I couldn't pretend it was nothing anymore. For about a week, things stayed quiet. Then one night, I was home alone again, and I heard scratching at my bedroom door. Slow, deliberate scratching. I knew nobody was there. I tried ignoring it, but it kept going. Eventually, I got up and hit the door hard with my palm just to make it stop. And it did. After that, I didn't hear much from it for nearly a month. Then last night happened. I went to bed early, and at first everything seemed fine. I had a dream that was strange, but not exactly scary. I was in the back kitchen of this little diner, cleaning with a teacher and a few friends from school. It felt long, like I was in there for ages, wiping counters and stacking dishes under bright fluorescent lights. But near the end, the mood changed. My teacher started acting cruel. Not just annoyed, but genuinely furious, like something had slipped behind her face and was using her anger as a mask. Then suddenly I was running home with my friends, completely out of breath. And then I woke up. The dream itself wasn't the worst thing. What scared me was how I felt when I opened my eyes. I had this awful, heavy feeling in my body. I recognized it, but it took me a while to place it. It was the exact feeling I've had after the worst nightmares of my life. Not normal bad dreams, but the kind that stay in your head for years and make your stomach turn when you remember them. I've only had a couple like that. But this time, I hadn't actually had the nightmare yet. It felt like one was waiting for me, like if I closed my eyes for even a second, I would drop straight into it. then I felt the mimic behind me. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. But I knew it was there. Somehow that was worse. I stayed completely still and tried to ignore it. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of faces. Distorted ones. Too close. Too stretched out. I saw animals that looked almost real, except their proportions were wrong in this cartoonish, human way that made my skin crawl. At one point, I swear I felt something in my lap. When I looked down, or thought I did, there was this dog there with bare skin instead of fur, and a nose that was way too large for its face. I've never hallucinated before. Not once. That's what scared me most. Last night made me realize ignoring this thing isn't making it leave. Cleansing the house didn't seem to remove it either. Every time I act like it isn't there, it feels like it gets bolder, stronger, more comfortable. And now it feels like it's not just trying to copy voices anymore. It feels like it's trying to get inside my head. I live just outside Nashville, in a quiet suburb near a man-made lake. It's not the kind of place where you expect anything strange to happen. Everything feels pretty ordinary out here. Peaceful even. So when this started, I honestly didn't know what to make of it. My apartment complex is small, but we have a decent-sized backyard behind the building. Past that, there's a storage facility, and my balcony overlooks most of it. I've lived in my second-floor apartment for almost 3 years, and for the longest time, nothing unusual ever happened. Then, about 6 months ago, things changed. It was right around the time my old dog passed away. I can't remember if it was a few days before or a few days after, but it was close enough that the timing still bothers me. One night, I was sitting out on my balcony when I heard someone calling a name from far off, somewhere toward the back of the storage facility near the neighborhood. At first, I thought somebody was looking for a lost pet. The voice had that kind of drawn-out, searching sound to it. But then it got closer, and once it was close enough for me to really hear it, I realized it was calling my dog's name. I'm not someone who panics easily. Even when something feels spooky, I try to stay grounded. I try not to give fear too much room. But in that moment, I got chills all over my body. I stood up, went inside as calmly as I could, and closed the balcony door behind me. Later that night, I was in the living room watching TV, trying to settle down for bed, when I heard it again. My bedroom window was open, and from where I was sitting, the voice sounded like it was coming from the backyard. At first, I thought it was calling my dog's name again, and I just froze on the couch. Then, suddenly, it sounded like the voice was right at my bedroom window. And this time, it called my child's name. I'm on the second floor. That's what made my stomach drop. There was no reason for anyone to sound that close to my window. I got up, walked to my room, shut the window, closed the blinds, turned off the light, and slept on the couch that night. A couple of months later, I was back out on the balcony during the day. I was talking to a guy I had been seeing at the time, sending voice notes back and forth. My neighbor was outside at the far end of the yard with her dog, Daisy. The conversation somehow turned to the paranormal, and he asked me if I'd ever experienced anything strange. I said, "Actually, yes, something happened pretty recently." And as I started telling him the story, I heard a voice from somewhere in the middle of the storage facility. At first, I ignored it, but then it sounded closer, like it had moved toward the property line near my side of the yard. And clear as day, I heard it call, "Daisy." That was my neighbor's dog's name. It was on the voice note. The microphone didn't catch it perfectly, but you can hear enough. You can hear the voice, and then you can hear me react and say something like, "There it is. It's calling my neighbor's dog. Can you hear that?" In the next recording, I stayed quiet for a bit, waiting to see if it would happen again. Nothing happened while I was silent, but the second I started talking again, you could faintly hear it in the background. Daisy. So that was my proof. At least I knew I wasn't imagining it. Still, I tried not to feed into it. I felt protected. I prayed. I set boundaries. I told myself that whatever was on that land, it didn't have permission to bother me or come near my home. And for a while, I just went on with my life. But last night was different. I was sitting on my balcony, relaxing, just about ready to go inside, when I heard a beagle barking somewhere in the neighborhood. Then I heard a woman's voice call out. I figured someone was calling their dog, because the barking stopped right after that. Then the voice called again, and again. By the third time, I realized it was getting closer. It was coming from the direction of the storage facility. As soon as I understood that, my heart sank. Then the voice called again, louder this time. It was calling my name. I froze. For a second, I tried to convince myself I had misheard it. I thought, no, surely that wasn't my name. Then it called again. It was definitely my name. The voice sounded like a normal woman's voice, but the feeling behind it was wrong. The tone was cold, almost mocking. There was something underneath it that felt cruel. Every hair on my arms stood up, my whole body filled with dread. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just strange anymore. It felt real, and it did not feel good. I couldn't even pretend to stay calm. I got up, rushed inside, slammed the balcony door, turned off the lights, and called my best friend. I stayed on the phone with her for nearly 2 hours. We prayed. I sprinkled salt near the doors and windows. I said out loud that nothing was welcome in my home, nothing had permission to enter, and nothing was allowed to attach itself to me or my family. For a while, I could still feel it, that heavy presence, that awful pressure. But eventually, it faded. I did manage to sleep, but even now, every time I think about that voice saying my name, I get goosebumps. I'm just grateful I'm moving in a month. When I was 7 years old, my family used to take long walks across the moors almost every weekend. I grew up near Saddleworth Moor, so even as a child, I knew that place had a dark history. I was born in 1993, so this would have been around the year 2000. Back then, I hadn't really had anything paranormal happen to me, but I was always drawn to spooky things. Horror, gothic stories, ghosts, anything strange or eerie. I also used to have dreams that felt like they came true later. Little moments, conversations, actions. Then when they happened in real life, I'd get this awful déjà vu. Around that same time, I was also having sleep paralysis almost every night, though thankfully that stopped when I got older. That day on the moors, we were out walking with our dogs like usual. No real plan, just wandering as a family. My Great Dane, Maverick, suddenly ran off, and I chased after him. When I went around this grassy mound, everything changed. There was a house there, or maybe it was more like an old stone barn. It looked ancient, rough, and weather-worn, with a big, twisted tree standing beside it. Maverick immediately started panicking. He was pulling at me, whining, trying to drag me away, but I couldn't move back. I felt like I was being pulled toward the building. I could hear voices. Some sounded like they were inside. Others sounded like they were outside, drifting through the air. When I reached the barn door, everything stopped. The wind, the birds, all of it. Maverick was crying beside me, and at one point he bit my hand hard enough to draw blood. He had never bitten me before. He was a gentle dog, the kind that worried if I tripped while playing. But I didn't even feel it when it happened. I opened the door. Inside, it looked empty, but I could hear this slow, rhythmic creaking. Maverick refused to come in. He paced outside like something was blocking him. Then I heard a whisper from the darkness. It said my name. My whole body froze. I couldn't breathe. It felt like I was being squeezed from every direction. The voice told me to turn around, and even though I didn't want to, I did. At first, there was nothing there, just darkness and that creaking sound. Then something gently lifted my chin, like a hand under my jaw, and I saw them. Women hanging from the beams. There must have been 20 of them, all different ages, young and old, all wearing white nightgowns. They were swaying, even though there was no wind. Then the voices started again, but this time, they were inside my head. Some were screaming for help. Some said, "Join us." Others said, "You did this to us." Then whatever was holding me let go. I fell backward and hit the floor. I could breathe again. I ran for the door, but just as I reached it, a deeper voice spoke behind me. It said, "I'll see you soon, child." I ran as fast as I could, with Maverick right beside me. When I came around the mound again, I ran straight into my parents. Only now there were other people there too. Walkers, dogs, police officers. My dad grabbed me and just held on to me. He kept asking where I'd been, why I hadn't answered, why I hadn't come back. I was so confused because to me, only a few minutes had passed. But the sky was darker. It was almost evening. My dad told me I'd been missing for hours. I said I'd been at the house with the big tree. Everyone looked confused because there was no house there. There never had been. I've checked records since then, old maps, even library archives. Nothing. No house, no barn, no plans to build one. A few police officers went to look, but they came back saying there was nothing there. Then my dad noticed my hand was bleeding, and we went to the hospital. After that, nothing dramatic happened for a while. No hauntings, no voices. But I kept dreaming about the house, and I always had this feeling that I wasn't alone. Not exactly in danger, but not safe either. 2 years later, something happened at home. At the time, it was me, my mom, my dad, and my older sister. My sister and I had a terrible relationship. She hated me from when I was little, and as we got older, it became more than name-calling. She could be cruel and sometimes violent. My parents worked long hours, so they didn't always know how bad it was. One day, my sister told me she could hear a hurt cat in the attic. I loved animals, especially cats, and she knew I'd go looking. The attic could only be opened from the outside with pull-down stairs. I went up, and she promised she'd hold the stairs in place. There was a light cord near the entrance, but when I pulled it, nothing happened. I could still see a little from the hallway light, so I crawled forward, calling for the cat. Then the attic door slammed shut. My sister laughed from below and told me to have fun with the spiders. I screamed. I cried. I begged her to let me out. She didn't. After a while, I felt it again. The thing from the barn. It felt like it was sitting behind me, close, but not touching. I curled up on the floor, terrified, and then I felt a hand stroking my hair. It was warm, not cold, not ghostly. It felt real. It didn't speak. It just stayed there with me, gently stroking my hair until my mom came home hours later and got me out. Nobody believed me about what had happened. I was grounded instead. But that whole week, my sister started having nightmares. Every night, she screamed that something was pulling her out of bed. No one knew why it was only happening to her. But I knew. I felt like it was protecting me. After that, the presence stayed. I never saw a face. It was more like a shadow or a feeling. I started talking to it. I didn't have many friends, and in a strange way, it became comforting. It listened. It was just there. Years later, when I was in high school, my mom and I moved to the Netherlands. My home life was still difficult, but by then it was just the two of us. One day, there was a school charity event with stalls, crafts, raffles, and little spiritual booths. One of them offered aura photography. I was very into witchy, gothic, afterlife things, so of course I wanted to try it. The woman running the booth was older, Chinese, and very kind. She took my picture, but as soon as she saw it, her expression changed. She brought me to a quieter area and showed me the photo. One side of the image was full of red, purple, and a little yellow. The other side was black, completely black. And in that blackness, there was the shape of a person with a hand on my right shoulder. She asked if I knew what it was. I told her everything. She said it wasn't trying to hurt me, but it was using me. She said it wanted to hurt others through me, like I was a doorway or a battery. It was helping me bottle up everything I felt, every hurt, every fear, every bit of anger. And one day, when I couldn't hold it anymore, it would release itself and move on. I was numb. I thanked her and left. As I was walking away, a younger woman came over and asked if I wanted a reading. I told her the older woman had already given me one. She looked shocked and asked if I spoke Cantonese. I said no. She told me her mother didn't speak Dutch or English, only Cantonese. I burned the photo when I got home. The last encounter happened in a dream when I was in my late 20s. My sleep paralysis had started coming back, not every night, but a few times a month. One night, after an episode, I dreamed I was in an old chicken barn. It wasn't being used anymore. I was with 3 other children, and we were sitting around a Ouija board, laughing and asking silly questions. We asked, "Is anyone here?" The planchette moved to yes. We asked, "What's your name?" It spelled Sarah. Then we asked, "Why are you here?" It spelled danger. We asked, "Who's in danger?" It answered, "You." Then it started spelling one word over and over. Run, run, run. Even when we let go, it kept moving. We all ran. Behind us, the light bulbs exploded one by one. We got to the house, and my mom came outside furious, yelling because she had told us never to mess with a Ouija board. There was banging coming from inside the barn, like something was tearing it apart. Then my mom grabbed a petrol can, poured fuel around the barn, especially by the door, and set it on fire with matches and oily rags. When I woke up, my heart was racing. It felt real, too real. I told my mom about it, and at first she said I had never played with a Ouija board. But the more I described, the quieter she got. I told her there had been another boy and girl there. I told her about the lights exploding. I described what the adult had been wearing when they came out of the house: old jeans, suspenders, and green boots. My mom went pale. Then she said, "That wasn't you. That didn't happen to you. It happened to me." She told me that when she was a child, she and her siblings had played with a Ouija board in an old barn. Every detail matched, even things I hadn't told her yet. Then she said the person who came out of the house wasn't her. It was her father. I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born, and my mom never kept pictures of him or talked about him. But suddenly I could see his face in my mind. I described him to her, and all the color drained from her face. She left the room and never spoke to me about it again. I'm 32 now, and since that day, she still changes the subject whenever I bring it up. And that night, the presence left. I felt it go. It stroked my hair one last time, the way it had when I was a child trapped in the attic. Then it was gone.